She didn't cry. That was the part that broke him. Madame Sun-hee Kwon stood at the foot of her daughter-in-law's hospital bed at 1 in the morning, dressed like she was attending a board meeting, and she said the cruelest thing a woman can say to another woman who is fighting to stay alive. Even your own husband has grown tired of you. Naomi Bennett Kwon didn't scream, didn't beg. She pressed her lips together and said quietly, "When I recover, you won't have to see me again." And outside that door, the man those words were designed to destroy stood absolutely still. Darius Kwon heard every word. If you've ever swallowed your pain to keep the peace in a family that never accepted you, this story will reach somewhere deep. Stay with us until the end. And if you're new here, subscribe right now because we tell stories that stay with you. Hit that like button, drop your city and country in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning. The hospital corridor smelled like antiseptic and cold air, and the particular silence that only exists at that hour when the world has stopped pretending everything is fine. Darius had not told anyone he was coming. That was deliberate. He had not brought his driver past the parking structure. He had not called ahead to have the floor cleared. He had not worn the watch that cost more than most people's cars. Tonight he was not Darius Kwon, the name that made restaurant owners suddenly remember they had a better table available. He was just a man in a dark coat walking down a hospital hallway at 1:17 in the morning because his wife was sick and he had waited 3 days too long to come. He told himself those 3 days were necessary. He told himself there was a shipment situation in Busan, a creditor problem in Incheon, a meeting with a man named Cho that could not be rescheduled without sending the wrong message. Darius Kwon's entire life was built on never sending the wrong message. Every silence was intentional. Every absence was calculated. Every delayed response was a tool. He was starting to wonder what kind of tool his absence had become to Naomi. The thought arrived the way uncomfortable thoughts always arrived for him. Not loudly, not with drama, but quietly, the way water gets into a wall. You don't notice it until the damage is already done. Room 412 was at the end of the corridor. He knew this because he had paid for that specific room. Corner placement, natural light in the morning, the private nursing team that would see to her before she had to ask. He had arranged all of it through his assistant, Park, because Darius Kwon arranged things. That was how he showed care. That was how he had always shown care. Through logistics, through resources, through making problems disappear before they could become problems. He was exceptionally good at it. He had never once considered that Naomi might need something that could not be arranged through Park. He was about 15 feet from her door when he heard his mother's voice. Darius stopped. It was not the sound of his mother's voice that stopped him. He had heard that voice deliver bad news, deliver threats, deliver ultimatums, deliver eulogies. He had heard that voice cut through rooms full of dangerous men who went quiet the moment she spoke. Madame Sun-hee Kwon was 61 years old, had buried one husband and outlasted 2 business partners, and she carried herself like a woman who had decided very early that softness was a kind of poverty she refused to live in. What stopped Darius was the tone. He recognized it immediately, the way you recognize the smell of something burning before you can locate the source. It was the tone his mother used when she had decided something needed to be corrected. Patient, precise, surgical. He stood in the corridor and he listened. "You have never understood what it means to carry this family's name," his mother was saying, and her voice was measured and calm in a way that was worse than shouting. "I have watched you for 3 years. 3 years, Naomi. I have been patient. I have been gracious. But this..." And here there was a pause, the kind of pause that lands like a hand on a shoulder. "This illness of yours has become an embarrassment that the family can no longer ignore." Darius did not move. The Kwon name has weight. It has history. It has obligations. And you, another pause. "You have been a beautiful ornament on my son's arm and nothing more. A foreign woman with a kind face and no understanding of what it costs to belong to a family like this." He should have walked in. He knew that even as he stood there, he should have pushed open that door and ended it. But something held him in place. Not cowardice, he told himself. Something else. Some instinct that said, "Wait. Listen. You need to know how far this has gone." "Darius chose you because he thought it was modern," Sun-hee continued. "He thought it was progressive. He thought it made him look like a man who was above the old ways. And I allowed it because I believed you would grow into the role. But you haven't. You've made yourself small. You've made yourself a guest in your own household. And now you are sick in a bed that my family is paying for. And my son, the pause this time was longer, deliberate, designed to land. My son hasn't been here in 3 days. There was silence from inside the room. Darius felt something move through him that he did not have a clean word for. It was not quite guilt, and it was not quite anger. It was something beneath both of those things, something structural, like a beam shifting. He hasn't been here, his mother said again, softer now, which was somehow crueler, because even your own husband has grown tired of you. Darius Kwon had ordered men to be hurt for lesser provocations than this. He had watched negotiations collapse into violence and remained completely still because stillness was his greatest weapon. He had stood in rooms where people were afraid of him and felt nothing because fear was just another form of information. But standing in that corridor, listening to his mother deliver that sentence to his wife in a hospital bed at 1 a.m, Darius felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt sick. And then he heard Naomi's voice. She did not cry. He had braced for it, not because he thought her weak, but because he would have cried, if he were honest about it, if someone had said that to him when he was already at his lowest. But Naomi Bennett Kwon did not give his mother tears. What she said was quiet. What she said was steady. What she said was, "When I recover, you won't have to see me again." Not a threat. Not a breakdown. Just a statement of intent from a woman who had clearly, somewhere between the IV drip and the third sleepless night, made a decision. The corridor felt very long. His mother appeared in the doorway a moment later, pulling her coat straight, the way she always did when she was done with something. She looked up and saw her son standing there, and for just a fraction of a second, just one, Madam Sun Hee Kwan's face showed something, not remorse. His mother was not built for remorse, but something. Recognition be that the geography of this situation had just shifted considerably beneath her feet. Darius said nothing. He looked at her for a long moment, long enough to make the silence its own kind of sentence, and then he looked at the door to room 412. His mother opened her mouth. He walked past her before she could arrange whatever justification she'd been preparing, and he pushed open the door. Naomi was sitting up slightly in the bed. He had to make himself look at her properly because there was a reflex in him that wanted to assess quickly and move on, the way you assess a tactical situation, get the overview, and start planning. But he made himself slow down. He made himself actually see her. She was pale in a way that worried him. Not the ordinary pale of someone tired, but something underneath that, something that said her body had been working very hard at something and not winning by as wide a margin as everyone would like. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there at the wedding, or at New Year's, or at the last time he had actually sat in a room with her long enough to look at her face. When had that been? He found, standing there, that he could not immediately answer that question. The answer was probably somewhere in the vicinity of 6 weeks ago, and the fact that he couldn't be more precise than that told him something about himself that he didn't particularly want to know. Naomi looked at him. She did not look surprised. She looked like a woman who had decided, somewhere in the last few minutes, that she was done being surprised by anything. "You didn't have to come tonight," she said. Her voice was even. "It's late." There it was. The thing that Darius had not understood until this exact moment was how the even voice was not composure. It was armor. Naomi Bennett Kwon had learned somewhere inside this marriage that showing him what things cost her was not safe, not because he had punished her for it. He had never done that. He was certain of it. He would have said so under oath. But because she had learned through 1,000 small signals he had never consciously sent but apparently transmitted anyway, that this was not a household where vulnerability was received with warmth. He had not known that was the lesson she was learning. He had been so busy managing everything else. "I know," he said. He walked to the chair beside her bed, the uncomfortable plastic chair, the kind that made you aware of your spine after 20 minutes, and he sat down in it, not in the visitors area by the window, right beside her. "I know it's late." Naomi looked at the door he had come through, then back at him. "Did you see?" she started. "Yes." She absorbed that. He watched her think about what it meant that he had been standing in that corridor, and what it meant that he had heard what he had heard, and what it meant that he was now sitting here in the plastic chair at 1:30 in the morning. She didn't mean it harshly, Naomi said. Darius looked at his wife. He had, in his life, sat across tables from men who lied to his face with the confidence of people who believed their own lies completely. He had a very good sense of when someone believed what they were saying and when they were trying to make themselves believe it. Naomi was not lying to him. She was genuinely, in this moment, trying to give his mother the benefit of a doubt she had no reason to receive. Naomi, he said. She's worried about the family, Naomi said. The way she was raised, the things she had to protect. I don't always understand it, but I don't think she… Stop. He said it quietly, not harshly. She stopped. You're defending her, he said, and she said that to you while you have an IV in your arm. The silence that followed lasted maybe 10 seconds. Naomi looked at her hands. She had very good hands. He had always noticed that about her, the way she moved them when she spoke, expressive and unguarded in a way that the rest of her had gradually stopped being. He realized, watching her look at those hands, that he had not seen her speak freely like that in a very long time. Not at family dinners, not at the household events his mother organized, not in the rooms where the Kwon family assembled, and Naomi sat at the edge and smiled and said the right things and was never once made to feel that she was anything other than a guest. I don't want to cause more trouble, she said, finally. By being sick? By making you choose. That sentence landed somewhere below his ribs, and Darius was quiet for a moment because he wanted to answer it properly, and he wasn't sure he had the right words immediately available. What if I should have chosen a long time ago, he said, and I was the one who was wrong for not doing it? She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since he had walked in, and he could see all the things she was deciding whether to say. He could see the years of it. Not rage. Naomi was not a raging person, but something more exhausting than rage. The particular tiredness of someone who has been reasonable for so long that being reasonable has become indistinguishable from being defeated. She didn't answer him directly. What she did instead was reach toward the small table beside her bed and push a folder a few inches in his direction, almost like she wasn't sure she was going to do it until she had already done it. Darius looked at the folder. He did not immediately understand what he was looking at. His mind cataloged it as documents, official, Korean legal formatting, which meant… He picked up the corner and looked at the header. He read it twice. Divorce petition, preliminary filing. Her name, his name. The date at the top was 4 days ago. Naomi. I was going to tell you, she said, when I was better. I didn't want to have this conversation while I was… She gestured at the IV, at the hospital room, at herself. Like this. How long have you been planning this? She was quiet. Not long, she said, and also a very long time, depending on how you count. Darius set the folder back on the table. He sat with that for a moment. Not the content of it. The content was something he would need to process when he could think clearly, when he wasn't sitting in a plastic hospital chair at almost 2 a.m, having just heard his mother tell his wife that her own husband had stopped caring. No. He sat with what the folder meant, what the fact of its existence meant. Naomi had not come to him in anger. She had not issued an ultimatum. She had gone, quietly, when she was sick, to an attorney, and she had started the paperwork, and she had been planning to tell him when she recovered because she did not want to add her own crisis on top of her illness. She had been doing things the way she always did things, managing herself, protecting everyone else's comfort, removing herself from the picture before anyone had to ask. Darius Kwon was, by the assessment of every person who had ever negotiated with him, an exceptionally controlled man. People who did not know him assumed this meant he felt very little. People who did know him understood it meant something quite different. It meant he felt quite a lot and had developed over a very long time a very sophisticated system for not letting any of it show until he chose to let it show. Sitting in that chair, he felt the system strain. You're leaving, he said, not because you stopped loving me. It wasn't a question. He knew Naomi. He knew the folder was not anger, not revenge, not manipulation. The folder was exhaustion. The folder was a woman who had decided that the kindest, most dignified thing she could do for herself was leave before it got worse. She looked at him with something in her expression that was almost worse than sadness, something that had already made its peace. I'm not going to keep living in a house where I have to earn the right to exist in it every single day, she said. And I'm not going to keep asking you to do something about it. You shouldn't have to be asked, and I'm tired of being the thing you'll get to when everything else is handled." Darius said nothing. Because she was right. He knew she was right, and she knew he knew she was right. And for a moment they were just two people sitting with the weight of that very clearly, without the protection of any of the deflections they had both gotten very good at using. He did not argue. He did not justify. He did not explain the Busan situation, or the Incheon creditor, or the man named Cho. He sat in the plastic chair. He looked at the folder. And then he looked at his wife, really looked at her, the way he should have been looking at her for months, maybe years. And he made a decision. Not the kind of decision he usually made, the kind that came with contingencies and exits and multiple layers of plausible deniability. A simpler kind of decision, the kind that does not come with a backup plan. He reached out and he put his hand over hers. Not the way people touch each other in public to signal something. The private way. The way you touch someone when you're not performing anything. Naomi looked down at his hand on hers. She didn't pull away, but she also didn't look up at him right away, and he understood that looking up would cost her something she was not ready to spend yet. So he didn't ask her to. He just sat there. The plastic chair dug into his spine. The hospital was very quiet. The IV drip counted out its small, patient seconds. "I need you to not make any decisions right now," he said. "About the folder, about anything. Give me, not forever. I'm not asking for forever. Give me some time." "Darius, I know," he said. "I know what I'm asking. I know I don't have the credit for it right now." She was quiet for a long moment. "A little time," she finally said. "Not yes, not forgiveness, but a small door left not quite closed." Darius nodded. He stayed in the plastic chair. He did not call Park. He did not check his phone. He sat in the specific discomfort of that chair, and he thought about everything he had not done and everything he intended to do about it. His mind moved the way it always moved, not in emotions but in strategy, in architecture, in what would need to happen and in what order. By 3 a.m., when Naomi had finally fallen back to sleep in the way sick people sleep, fitfully and too light, Darius Kwon had the shape of something in his mind. Not a plan yet. The beginning of one. And the beginning was this. His mother had walked into that hospital room and said the truest thing she had ever accidentally said to him. Not to Naomi, but to him, through Naomi, which was that she believed the Kwon family was something Darius served rather than something he led. She believed that the arrangement of this marriage, the permission she had extended, the name she had lent, was a debt Naomi would always owe. She had made that mistake in front of him, and Darius Kwon had not risen to where he stood by letting mistakes go to waste. He looked at his wife's face in the low light of the hospital room. She was still pale, still too thin, still the woman who had, on their first meeting 4 years ago, said something so unexpectedly honest to him that he had thought about it for 2 days afterward, which was not something that happened to Darius Kwon. She had looked at him across a dinner arranged by their families and said, without any of the careful politeness everyone else in that room was performing, "You seem exhausted, not physically, the other kind, like you've been performing for a very long time." He had been furious at her for about 48 hours. Then he had asked her to marry him. He thought about that now. He thought about the woman who had seen through him on a first meeting, who had spent 3 years being quietly eroded by a family that mistook her gentleness for weakness, who had gone to an attorney while running a fever because she had decided that her dignity was worth more than the comfort of his name. She deserved more than a man who showed care through logistics. She deserved more than a man who let his silence become other people's permission. Outside the window, Seoul was starting to show the very first gray edge of morning, the kind that looks like uncertainty rather than dawn. Darius watched it for a while. Then he took out his phone, not to call anyone, not yet, but to start the particular kind of thinking that required a blank screen and complete silence and the specific clarity that came after a very long night. He had a family meeting to arrange, and for the first time in a very long time, he was going to say exactly what he meant. The morning after the hospital was a Tuesday, and Darius Kwon had not slept. Not in the way people say they haven't slept when they mean they slept badly, woke up too early, spent an hour staring at the ceiling. He meant it literally. He had sat in that plastic chair until the sky outside Naomi's window went from black to gray to the pale, unconvincing yellow that passes for dawn in Seoul in late autumn. And then he had straightened his coat, looked at his wife's face one more time, and walked out of the hospital into the cold air with the folder under his arm and the specific kind of alertness that only comes from being awake long enough that your body stops asking you to sleep and starts running on something more primitive. He sat in the back of the car. He had called Park at 5:40 a.m., and Park had arrived without complaint because Park always arrived without complaint, which was why Darius had kept him for 11 years. And he did not speak for the first 20 minutes of the drive. Park knew better than to fill the silence. He drove. The city moved past the windows in the particular gray and neon way it always moved at 6 in the morning, delivery trucks and street cleaners, and the occasional person walking fast with their head down, the city doing its maintenance work before the rest of the world came online and started demanding things. Darius looked at the folder on his lap. He opened it. He read the first page. He read the second page. He read the sections he already knew were there. Grounds, timeline, proposed division of shared property, a clause about the Mapo apartment he had bought in Naomi's name 2 years ago that she apparently intended to relinquish entirely, which told him several things at once, none of them comfortable. She wasn't doing this for money. She wasn't doing this to hurt him. She was doing this the way Naomi Bennett Kwon did everything, cleanly, quietly, trying to leave without making a mess. He closed the folder. Park, he said. Yes. Who has access to Naomi's medical file at St. Shiel? A pause. Her attending physician, the nursing team on 4, the administrator who processed the insurance, and Park hesitated. Your mother's office requested a copy 6 days ago. Dr. Huang approved the release. Darius looked out the window. When I ask you something, he said, and the answer involves my mother, I need you to tell me that part first. Understood. And Park? Yes. Get me everything on Dr. Huang. He didn't say what he meant by everything. He didn't have to. Park had been with him long enough to understand that when Darius asked for everything, he meant the kind of everything that would tell him exactly how Dr. Huang was connected to the Kwon family and what that connection had cost, over time, in ways that might now be relevant. The car stopped at a red light. Darius looked at a woman on the sidewalk adjusting the collar of a small child's coat, the child impatient and squirming, the woman completely focused on getting the collar right despite the squirming, and he felt something move through his chest that he put away immediately because there was no use for it right now. He had work to do, the kind of work that required him to be very, very clear about the difference between what he felt and what he was going to do about it. By 7:30 that morning, Darius was sitting across from his attorney, Jung Tae-won, in a conference room that smelled like expensive leather and fresh coffee and the ambient anxiety of large decisions. Jung was 53, had represented the Kwon family's legitimate business interests for 16 years, and had the particular quality Darius valued most in advisors. He said exactly what he thought and did not bother decorating it. You want to restructure everything, Jung said. He was looking at the list Darius had placed in front of him. He said it the way a surgeon says this is a significant procedure. Not scared, not dramatic, just precise. The holding company, the properties, the investment accounts, the voting block. Specifically the voting block, Darius said. Jung looked at him over his reading glasses. If you remove your mother as secondary voting authority on the Kwon Group subsidiary chain, the family council loses its override mechanism. I know. Which means if they want to make a move against any of your legitimate holdings, they'll need Naomi's signature, Darius said. Yes. Jung was quiet for a moment. He set the list down and took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose with the particular gesture of a man who is about to say something the other person may not want to hear. Darius, he said, walk through the reasoning. You don't need the reasoning. You need the instructions. I need the reasoning because if this goes sideways in the next 6 months and someone asks me why I structured it this way, I'd prefer to have an answer that isn't, my client was sleep-deprived and furious. Darius almost smiled. He did not smile often, and when he did it tended to unsettle people, which was one of the reasons he kept it infrequent. I'm not furious. You look furious. I look decisive. There's a difference. Jung put his glasses back on. What's the timeline? 24 hours. That's not possible. It's not possible for most people. It's why I pay you what I pay you. Jung looked at the list again. He turned it over. He tapped the edge of it against the table twice, a habit Darius had observed over 16 years of working with this man, Always the same gesture. Always when he was deciding whether the thing being asked was merely difficult or actually inadvisable. He tapped it twice, not 3 times, which meant difficult. "I'll need 3 things from you," Jung said. "Your signature on the restructuring authorization before noon. A private statement of intent, dated and witnessed, clarifying that this transfer is voluntary and uncoerced. And you need to decide what happens to the divorce petition." "Leave the petition." Jung looked up. "Leave it?" "Don't contest it. Don't file a response. Leave it open." A longer silence this time. Jung Tae-won had seen Darius Kwon move through transactions that would have paralyzed most men and had always understood the logic, even when the logic was ruthless. He was looking at him now like he was missing something. "If you don't respond," Jung said carefully, "she can proceed." "I know. That's not typically how men in your position." "I'm aware of how men in my position typically handle things," Darius said. His voice was flat but not cold. "That's not what I'm doing." Jung looked at him for another moment. Then he picked up his pen. "All right, I'll need you back here at 11:30. Darius stood. He buttoned his coat. He had been in this room for 45 minutes, and he had made more consequential decisions than most people make in a year, and his hands were completely steady. He noticed this the way he noticed most things about himself, clinically, as information. He was steadier when he knew what he was doing. The problem was what came next. What came next was his mother. He had been circling that conversation in his mind since the corridor outside room 412, planning it the way he planned everything, thinking about entry points and pressure points, and what each possible response would require from him. But every time he tried to map it out cleanly, it resisted, because this was not a negotiation. There was nothing to negotiate. His mother had gone to that hospital room and said what she said, and now he knew it, and she knew that he knew it, and there was no version of the conversation ahead of them that ended with anything resolved cleanly. His mother did not do clean resolutions. She did armistices. She did strategic retreats. She did the particular maneuver of apologizing for how something landed, rather than for the thing itself. He had watched her perform this his entire life, and had, for most of his life, found it impressive. Effective. The behavior of a woman who understood power. He understood it differently now. He drove himself to the Kwon estate. He had not driven himself anywhere in almost 4 years, but he sent Park home and took the secondary vehicle from the parking structure, a gray sedan that nobody would look at twice. And he drove north through the city toward the district where the estate sat behind its walls and its cameras and its particular atmosphere of money and permanence. The estate was 40 minutes from downtown in traffic. He made it in 28. His mother was in the morning room. She was always in the morning room at this hour. Tea, the financial pages, the schedule for the day that her personal assistant had prepared. Sun Hee Kwon operated on a routine that had not deviated significantly in 15 years. She believed routine was a form of authority. The world moved. She stayed fixed. This was how she communicated her position. She looked up when he walked in. She had already composed herself. He had known she would. She was wearing her indoor clothes, silk and understated, and her expression was the specific expression she used when she was prepared for a difficult conversation and intended to be the one who controlled its direction. "Sit down," she said. "No," Darius said. He was not rude about it. He said it the way he would have said no to anyone who tried to direct his behavior in his own space. Simply. Without heat. His mother's jaw shifted slightly. "You heard more than you were supposed to." "I heard what you said." "I said what needed to be said. Someone had to." "To a sick woman at 1 in the morning. Darius, she has a fever. She has been in that hospital for 6 days. And you went there at 1 in the morning to tell her that her own husband has stopped caring about her." He stopped. He breathed. He felt the pressure of everything he was not going to let himself say right now pushing against the inside of his chest. "That's what you chose to do." His mother set down her tea. She did it carefully, the way she did everything. No sudden movements, no displays of agitation, everything deliberate. "You want to hear her version of things." "I heard her version. She defended you." A flicker of something crossed his mother's face. Gone fast, but he caught it. He was very good at catching things that crossed faces fast. "She defended you," he repeated. "She told me you didn't mean it harshly. She told me you were worried about the family." He let that sit for a moment. "That should embarrass you." I am not ashamed of protecting this family. Her voice sharpened just slightly at the edges, the first sign that the composure had a seam in it. I am not ashamed of asking your wife to rise to the occasion that her position demands. If she found that cruel, perhaps she should ask herself why. Because she was sick, Darius said. Because she was alone. Because I wasn't there. Each sentence landed separately, and he let them land. And instead of being the person who sat with her, you were the person who made sure she knew exactly how little standing she has in this family. She needs to understand what she needs, he said, and his voice dropped in the way it dropped when he was about to say something that would be clearly heard, is for one person in this family to treat her like she belongs in it. That's all she's ever needed, and none of us gave it to her. Silence. His mother looked at him. You're angry, she said. Yes. You'll calm down. Probably, he said. But that won't change what I'm doing. Sun-hee stiffened. It was almost imperceptible. If you didn't know her, you'd have missed it. What does that mean? It means I have a meeting with Jung today. The name landed. He watched it land. Jung Tae-won's name in a conversation about family conflict meant legal architecture, and his mother knew legal architecture well enough to understand what that implied. Darius. Her voice changed. Not softer. Harder, but differently hard. The way iron gets harder when it cools too fast. Whatever you're planning, I'll call you when the meeting is done. He left. He did not slam the door. He did not raise his voice on the way out. He walked through the morning room and down the main corridor and out the front door of the Kwon estate, and the cold air hit him when he stepped outside, and he stood there for a second, just 1 second, and he breathed. Then he got in the car. He was back at Jung's office at 11:25. What happened in the next 3 hours was, from the outside, an almost boring series of signatures and notarizations, and the particular procedural language of legal restructuring. Documents moved across the conference table. Jung's assistants came in and out. Phone calls were made to registrars and administrators at the relevant financial institutions. The voting block authority was formally transferred. The property structure was realigned. The investment accounts were redistributed with new beneficiary designations. Each signature was a small, irrevocable thing. By the time it was finished, the Kwon family's access to the legitimate business interests Darius had personally built. Not inherited, but built, from the first company he had started at 26 with borrowed money and the kind of desperation that sharpens people into something useful, had been structurally altered in a way that could not be undone without his explicit cooperation. Or Naomi's. Jung watched him sign the last document. He dated it. He capped his pen. You understand this is going to cause considerable turbulence. Yes. Your uncle will contest it. Your cousin Soo-jin has 3 active contracts that route through the holding company. I know. Your mother. I know, Jung. Jung nodded. He slid the file across the table. Then we're done for today. Darius picked up the folder. He sat with it for a moment, the way he had sat with the divorce petition in the back of the car that morning, just holding the weight of it, the physical fact of what it contained. 2 folders. One his, one hers. Both of them changing the shape of something that had been a certain way for 3 years. One more thing, Darius said. Yes? The family meeting. I need you to send formal notification of a required gathering to the senior members. Tonight, 9 p.m. at the estate. He paused. Use the standard emergency council language. Jung looked at him. Emergency council language implies a crisis. It does, Darius agreed. Is there a crisis? Darius stood and buttoned his coat and picked up both folders. He looked at Jung Tae-won, who had known him for 16 years and had seen him walk through decisions that would have made lesser men physically ill, and he said, There is for them. The notifications went out at 2 in the afternoon. By 3:15, Darius's phone had registered 11 missed calls. His uncle, Kwon Byung-jun, called twice. His cousin Soo-jin called 3 times in 8 minutes, which indicated she had already spoken to someone at the financial institution and gotten enough information to be alarmed. 2 of the senior family advisors called. Park texted to say that Madam Sun-hee had attempted to reach him through a secondary channel, which meant she had already tried Darius's direct line and gotten voicemail. He listened to none of the messages. He went back to the hospital. Naomi was sitting up when he arrived. She had more color than the night before. Not much, but some. Her doctor had apparently told her the fever had broken sometime around noon, which was the first genuinely good news of the last 7 days. She was eating something when he came in, some kind of broth that she was clearly eating without appetite, but with the deliberate focus of someone who understands that eating is maintenance and maintenance is how you get out of the hospital. She looked at him when he walked in. She looked at the folders under his arm. She looked back at his face. "You have that expression," she said. "What expression?" "The one where you've already decided something and you're about to tell me what it is." He sat in the chair, the same plastic chair. He had not slept in it, and his spine remembered. "I need to tell you some things," he said, "and I need you to hear them in the right order." She set down the spoon. She gave him her full attention, which was something Naomi did that he had always noticed. When she listened, she actually listened. She wasn't running parallel calculations or looking for the moment she could respond. She just looked at you and took in what you were saying. It should not have been remarkable. It was remarkable. It was remarkable because it was rare. "Okay," she said. "I know about the last 3 years," he said. "Not all of it. I know I don't know all of it, but I know enough. The dinners, the comments about your accent, my uncle's wife telling you at the New Year's gathering that you must find Korean customs confusing." He stopped. He made himself say the rest of it. "I knew those things were happening. I thought if I didn't react, it would pass. I thought engaging with it made it larger." He looked at his hands. "That was wrong. My not reacting wasn't neutrality. It was permission, and I didn't understand that until last night." Naomi was very still. "I'm not telling you this," he said, "to make you feel like you have to forgive me right now. I'm telling you because you deserve to hear me say it clearly, without me trying to explain it into something smaller than it is." A long pause. Outside the window, the afternoon was already getting dark, the way it did in November, the light withdrawing early like it had somewhere better to be. "Darius," she said, and her voice was careful. "What did you do today?" He told her. Not everything, not the specific legal mechanics, not Jung's name or the structure of the transfer, but the shape of it. He told her that he had made changes to his business holdings. He told her that those changes would be relevant to the family meeting tonight. He told her that he intended to bring her to that meeting. She stared at him. "I'm in the hospital." "You can leave for 2 hours with medical clearance. I've already spoken to your doctor." Her eyes went still. "You spoke to my doctor about bringing me to a family meeting. Dr. Ahn said your fever broke. You're stable. You'd need to return by 10. "Darius." She said his name like someone testing the structural integrity of a word. "I am wearing a hospital gown and I look like I haven't slept in a week." "You haven't slept in a week. That's not—" She stopped. She pressed her fingers against her forehead. "This is not how I want to do this. I don't want to sit in front of your entire family looking like someone who's been sick," he said. "Yes, that's exactly what I need them to see." Silence. She looked at him for a long time. He let her look. He didn't push. "What is this meeting actually for?" she asked. "I want them to answer a question in front of you, and I want you to hear their answer directly, not filtered through me, not summarized after the fact. I want you to be in the room." "What's the question?" He held her gaze. "What you're worth to this family." Something shifted in Naomi's face. Not anger, not quite fear. Something more complicated than both. The expression of someone who has been bracing for a door to open for a very long time and is now uncertain whether they actually want it to. "They'll say what they always say," she said, politely, with qualifications. "No," Darius said, "they won't. Not tonight." She looked at him for another long moment. Her eyes were very dark and very steady, and they held the particular expression that he had noticed on that first dinner 4 years ago, the one that had stayed with him for 48 hours afterward, the one that saw through things. "You've done something," she said, "something you can't undo." "Yes." "And you did it before asking me." He didn't flinch from that. "Yes." She breathed, long and slow. The IV stand beside her made its small, regular sound. "Tell me what you want from me tonight, specifically." "I want you to sit next to me. I want you to say nothing unless you want to say something. And I want you to see what happens when I ask them that question and they think I've already made my decision." "What decision do they think you've made?" He looked at her, and he said the thing he knew would land hardest. Not because he wanted to cause her pain, but because she needed to understand the architecture of what was coming. "They're going to think I've finally decided to let you go." The words sat between them. Naomi looked at him with something in her expression that was not quite betrayal and not quite hurt, something more nuanced than both. The expression of a woman who has learned not to be surprised and is now, despite everything, slightly surprised. "And have you?" she asked. "No," he said. "But they're going to believe I have because they want to believe it. And what people believe when they think they're about to get what they want is the truest thing you'll ever hear from them." Another silence. Naomi reached toward the tray beside her bed and picked up the spoon again. She looked at the broth. She didn't eat it, she just held the spoon, turning it slightly, the way a person holds something when they need something to do with their hands, while they decide something that cannot be undecided. "I'll need clothes," she said. "Real ones, not what I came in with." "I had Park go to the house this morning." She looked at him. "Of course you did." "There's a bag in the car." She shook her head slowly, not in refusal, in something more complicated. Then she set the spoon down. She looked at him squarely. "Darius, if this goes wrong, if they say all of it, everything, and I have to sit there and hear it, you need to understand that I'm not going to be able to hold it together perfectly. I'm sick. I'm tired. I don't have the energy to perform composure right now." "I don't want you to perform composure," he said. "I want them to see you exactly as you are, every bit of what this has cost you." Naomi looked at him for a long time. "Then you'd better make sure," she said quietly, "that whatever you're planning is worth it, because I'm not doing this twice." Darius nodded. He understood her completely. He stood, and he straightened his coat, and he looked at the folder that sat on the bedside table. The divorce petition, still there, still open, still technically the most active legal document in either of their lives, and he left it exactly where it was. He was back at 6 to bring her the bag. At 8:45 that evening, Darius Kwon drove through the gates of the Kwon estate with his wife in the passenger seat. She was dressed in the dark charcoal coat Park had packed, her hair pulled back simply, no jewelry, no armor, no performance. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had been sick and was not entirely recovered and had come here anyway because her husband had asked her to, and because she had decided at some point in the last 2 hours that her dignity was not something she was willing to let other people negotiate on her behalf anymore. She looked at the estate as the car came up the drive. She had lived in this house for 8 months after their wedding before they moved to the Mapo apartment. She knew every corridor. She knew the dining room with its enormous table and its paintings and its smell of old wood and considered authority. She had never once felt like she belonged in it. "Naomi," Darius said, "I'm fine." "I know. I just wanted to say—" He stopped. He did something she had not seen him do very often. He tried to say something and could not immediately find the word for it. "I should have been sitting in that chair 6 months ago." She looked at him. "Not last night," he said. 6 months ago, a year ago. I should have been the one in that chair a long time before last night." Naomi looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at the estate. The lights were on. Through the windows, she could see figures moving. People already gathered, already waiting, the family assembled in the way families assembled when they believed they were about to inherit something. "Let's go," she said. They got out of the car. Darius did not take her arm in the way of someone supporting someone who needed support. He walked beside her, at her pace, and when they reached the top of the steps and the door opened and the attendant stepped back and the warmth and light of the Kwon estate came out to meet them, he put his hand briefly on the small of her back. Not possessive, not directive, just present, and they walked in together. From the dining room he could hear the sound of voices that had not yet gone quiet. They were about to. He had a folder under his arm and a question prepared and a family gathered around a table who believed, with the particular confidence of people who have never had reason to doubt their own importance, that tonight was the night Darius Kwon would finally do what they had wanted him to do for 3 years. They had no idea what was actually in that folder. And in approximately 3 minutes, when Darius walked his wife through the doors of that dining room, and every voice in it stopped, and every face turned toward them, and the silence hit the room like a change in air pressure, the point of no return would arrive. Not with a sound, but with the specific quality of stillness that falls over people when they realize, too late, that they have been performing for an audience they never knew was watching. He pushed open the dining room door. The dining room went quiet the way a room goes quiet when something enters it that nobody was prepared for. Not the gradual quiet of people noticing something and choosing to stop talking. The sudden kind. The kind where one person sees it, and then the person next to them sees it, and the silence spreads outward from the door like water from a dropped stone until it reaches the far end of the table, and the last conversation dies mid-sentence, and there is nothing left but the sound of the overhead lights, and 14 people looking at Naomi Bennett Kwon walking into a room she was never supposed to be in tonight. Darius had calculated this moment. He had thought about the optics of it, the way he thought about most things. What people would see, what they would assume, what their assumptions would make them do. He had expected the silence. He had expected the shift. What he had not entirely prepared for was how it would feel to watch Naomi walk into it. She did not falter. That was the thing. She was pale. She was not fully recovered. She had been in a hospital bed 22 hours ago, and she walked into that room like a woman who had decided somewhere between the car door and the dining room entrance that she was finished being small in spaces that didn't deserve her smallness. Her chin was level. Her eyes moved across the table without hurry, taking inventory the way a person takes inventory of a room they've been asked to leave too many times to still be surprised by. Darius watched his family watch her. His uncle, Kwon Byung-jun, sat at the near end of the table. 64 years old, heavy through the shoulders, the kind of man who had mistaken never being challenged for being unchallengeable. He was looking at Naomi with an expression that hadn't quite settled yet into whatever it was going to be. Some mixture of confusion and the particular annoyance of someone whose expectations have just been rearranged without their permission. Soo-jin was 3 seats down, Darius's cousin, 38, sharp in the way of people who have spent their whole lives in the periphery of power and developed acute instincts for self-preservation as a result. She was looking not at Naomi but at Darius, which told him she was already running calculations. His mother sat at the far end of the table. She had taken the seat that communicated her position most clearly, not the head, which she had always left for Darius, but the position that said she was the center of gravity regardless of where she sat. She was looking at Naomi with an expression that was perfectly, professionally composed. It was the composure that told Darius she was more rattled than anyone else in the room. He pulled out the chair beside his own, the one immediately to his right, the one that had sat empty at every family gathering for 3 years, while Naomi occupied a seat further down the table near the decorative end, the end that said guest. And he held it, and he looked at his wife, and he waited. Naomi looked at the chair. She looked at Darius. Something moved through her eyes that he couldn't name exactly. Recognition, maybe. An understanding of what the chair meant, what the placement meant, what he was saying without words. She sat in it. Darius sat beside her. He placed the folder on the table. He did not open it. He looked at the room. "I apologize for the short notice," he said. His voice was even, and it was quiet, which was more effective than volume, and he knew it. There are some matters that required the family's immediate attention. Byung-jun leaned forward. "What is she doing here?" He said it without malice, or rather without the awareness that it contained any, just the flat managerial tone of someone identifying an irregularity. "This is a family council matter." "Yes," Darius said, "it is." "Then why—" "I have a question I'd like the family to answer," Darius said. "I wanted Naomi present while you answered it." The room shifted, not visibly. Nobody moved, nobody spoke out of turn. But he felt it, the way you feel barometric pressure change before rain. The family was recalibrating. They were reading the room. They were looking at the folder on the table and at Naomi in the right-hand chair and at the particular set of Darius's jaw, and they were running the numbers. And they were arriving, most of them, at the wrong answer. He could see them arriving at it. The folder, to them, looked like paperwork. Conclusion of something. The chair Naomi was sitting in looked to them like a gesture of courtesy before a difficult announcement. They were building the narrative they wanted to be true. That Darius had finally, after 3 years of misplaced loyalty to a foreign wife who had never truly fit, come to his senses. He needed them to hold that belief for exactly long enough. "My question," Darius said, "is simple. I want to know what Naomi's value is to this family. Not sentimentally, not theoretically, actually. What is she worth to the Kwon name?" Silence. Then, from Byung-jun carefully, "Is this about the divorce?" "Answer the question," Darius said. Byung-jun glanced at Sun-hee. The glance lasted less than a second, but it was a full conversation. Is this what we think it is? Should we answer honestly? Is this a test? Sun-hee's expression did not change. Byung-jun looked back at Darius. The marriage was always a complicated arrangement, Byung-jun said. The foreign element created perception challenges with certain partners. There were concerns about cultural compatibility that were raised at the time and never fully resolved. He paused. If you're asking whether the family believes the arrangement has served its purpose, I think there is a consensus that a change might— I'm asking what she's worth, Darius said. Not the marriage, her, Naomi, as a person, to this family. A different silence this time, the kind that follows a question people hadn't expected to be asked in that form. Sujin spoke before she seemed to entirely decide to. She's not— She stopped, started again, more carefully. She has never been integrated into the family's operational structure. She has no role in the business. She has no— Replaceable, said a voice from the middle of the table. Darius looked. His cousin, Min-jun, 29, had said it with the confidence of someone who thought they were agreeing with the room. Min-jun registered, about half a second later, that the room had gone very still, and he adjusted his expression slightly, but the word was already in the air. Naomi did not move. Darius felt her not moving beside him with the specific quality of someone who is making a choice not to react, not someone who hasn't heard. Replaceable, Darius repeated. Flat, no inflection, just the word, sent back. Min-jun shifted in his chair. I only mean that the position of— the role that Naomi occupies within the family structure is one that could be— She's made it uncomfortable, Byung-jun said, with the air of a man who had decided that if they were being honest, they should be honest. Her presence in certain contexts has created friction with the Choi family, with the Lim partners, with the cultural expectations that our business relationships depend on. That's not a personal judgment. That's a structural reality. Sujin nodded, slightly, the way people nod when someone else has said the thing they would have phrased more carefully. The family image matters. International as it is, there are still— She's damaged it. This from Sun-hee. Quiet. Precise. From the far end of the table, every head turned. She was looking at Darius, not at Naomi, which was its own kind of statement. She was speaking about Naomi the way you speak about a piece of furniture you're rearranging, as if the furniture isn't in the room. I know you don't want to hear that from me right now, but if you're asking for honesty, Darius, her presence in the family has created more problems than it has solved. I have said this privately. I'm saying it now because you've asked for it publicly. She paused. Removing her would be best for everyone. The room was very quiet. Removing her would be best for everyone. Naomi sat completely still beside him. Darius did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the table, on the faces, on the particular collective expression of a family that believed it had just been given permission to say what it had always thought. He let the silence last exactly long enough. Then he put his hand on the folder and he slid it to the center of the table. Open it, he said. Nobody moved for a moment. Then Byung-jun reached forward and opened the folder. The first page was the restructuring authorization. The second page was the beneficiary transfer documentation. The third page was the new voting block structure with the signatory authority clearly laid out at the bottom. Byung-jun stared at it. He turned to the second page. He read it. His face did something complicated. Darius watched it happen, watched the comprehension arrive in stages, first the confusion, then the rereading, then the very particular expression of a man who has just understood that the ground under his feet is not where he thought it was. This is dated today, Byung-jun said. Yes. This transfers— He stopped. He looked at Darius. This transfers voting authority on the subsidiary chain to— He looked at Naomi. He looked back at the paper. This can't be current. It's been filed and registered. Jung has the confirmation. The properties, Sujin said, and her voice had changed entirely, the careful measured tone gone, something raw and faster underneath it. The Mapo properties, the Gangnam holdings, the Jeju investment, all of it, Darius said. The room erupted. Not all at once. It happened the way controlled structures collapse. One point of failure, then another, then the whole thing at speed. Byung-jun's voice rose first, demanding to know if this was a legal instrument or a provocation. Was Darius doing this to punish the family? Was this about the hospital? Because if this was about what Sun Hee said at the hospital, they could discuss it like rational people. They could sit down and work through it. Soo-jin was already on her phone, which told Darius she was calling someone at the financial institution, trying to verify, trying to find a mechanism, a window, some procedural angle that hadn't been closed. Min-jun, who had said replaceable 3 minutes ago, with the careless confidence of a young man who had never had to be careful, was sitting very still and looking at the folder like it was a document in a language he didn't speak. Sun Hee said nothing. That was the thing Darius noticed above everything else in the room. The noise, the voices overlapping, Byung-jun's escalating demands, Soo-jin on the phone, two of the senior advisors speaking to each other in the low, urgent tones of men trying to assess damage. Through all of it, his mother sat at the far end of the table and said nothing. She was looking at him. He looked back at her. And then something happened that Darius had not planned for. His mother said, "Show them the medical report." The room went quiet again. Fast. The words had a quality to them that cut through the noise the way a certain kind of sound cuts through. Not loud, just at the frequency that makes everything else stop. Darius said, "What?" Sun Hee's expression was still composed. It was the most frightening thing about her in this moment. The absolute control of a woman who had just detonated something and intended to remain standing when the smoke cleared. "The medical report," she said again. "Dr. Huang's assessment. Show them why Naomi has been in the hospital." The temperature in the room changed. Darius felt it. He felt Naomi feel it beside him. The particular quality of stillness that comes over a person's body when they are trying very hard not to show that they've been struck. "This is not the time," he started. "You wanted honesty," his mother said. "You opened this table to honesty, then let's have all of it." She looked at the room now, not at Darius, addressing the family the way she had always addressed the family when she needed them with her. Dr. Huang's preliminary assessment of Naomi's condition includes a notation about long-term stress indicators, chronic anxiety response, compromised immune function consistent with prolonged psychological strain. She paused. The report attributes contributing factors to, and I'm quoting the clinical language, significant ongoing social isolation and inadequate support structures within the immediate household environment. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Naomi made a sound beside him, very small, the kind of sound a person makes when they've been hit somewhere they didn't know was exposed. Darius turned to look at her. Her face was... He did not have a word for her face in this moment. She was looking at the table, not at his mother, not at the family, at the table, with the expression of someone who has just learned something about themselves from a stranger and has not yet decided whether it is true or devastating or both. He turned back to his mother. "How do you have that report?" "I requested it." "Her medical information is private." "I am the matriarch of this family, and she is my wife," Darius said, and the quietness of his voice in that moment was the kind of quiet that has mass, the kind that lands on surfaces. "And her medical file is not yours to access or to read aloud in a room full of people." "I accessed it," Sun Hee said, with the equanimity of a woman who had decided she was past the point of pretending, "because I needed to understand what was actually wrong with her. And what the report tells me, Darius, what it tells all of us, is that your wife's illness is not a mystery. It is a consequence." She let that land. A consequence of being in a marriage where the person beside her was absent for months at a time, in a household where she had no allies, in a family where nobody... And here her voice shifted, just slightly, the composure cracking at one seam only, "where nobody made her feel that she mattered. That is what the report says. And I'm telling you because you need to understand that this family did not make her sick. You did." The room was absolutely silent. Darius did not move. He sat with that. He sat with what his mother had just done, which was something he had not anticipated and should have. She had taken the weapon he had brought to this table and turned it over and pointed it back at him. She had not defended herself. She had not defended the family. She had taken the narrative of the evening, Darius exposing the family's cruelty, and she had expanded it to include him, accurately, devastatingly, in front of everyone, including his wife. He had come here tonight to dismantle his family's power over Naomi. His mother had just dismantled his. Darius, Naomi's voice, very quiet. He turned to look at her. She was still looking at the table. Her hands were in her lap. He could see one of them, the right one, and it was not steady. Is that what the report says? She asked. He did not answer immediately, because the honest answer was that he did not know the exact content of the report. He had known Huang had shared her file with his mother's office, and he had intended to address it. He had not yet read the full clinical notes, and the fact that he was sitting here without that information felt like a failure he should have anticipated. I haven't read the full report, he said. She nodded. Once. The nod of someone who is absorbing information and will deal with what they feel about it later, privately, when there are not 14 people watching. But the summary she read, Naomi said, stress indicators, isolation, inadequate support. She finally looked up, not at his mother, at him. That's not... She didn't make that up. No, he said. So she's right. About that part, he said. Not about what it means. What does it mean? It was a genuine question. She was asking him, in front of his entire family, in front of his mother who had orchestrated this pivot, with the skill of someone who had spent 60 years learning how rooms work, what his wife's illness, his wife's documented isolation, his wife's clinical evidence of being failed by the person who was supposed to be her closest ally, actually meant to him. And Darius, who had come into this room with a folder full of irrevocable decisions and a question designed to expose everyone else, found himself being asked to answer for himself. Byung-jun broke the silence before he could. It means, his uncle said, with the tone of someone who believed they were being helpful, that regardless of the structural changes you've made today, and we will be revisiting those, Darius, make no mistake, the core issue here is not the family's treatment of Naomi. The core issue is that this marriage has not functioned as a marriage. And that is, you don't get to diagnose my marriage, Darius said, cold, immediate. Someone has to, Byung-jun said, and his voice had found its steadiness again, the steadiness of a man who has identified an opening. Because you certainly haven't been paying attention to it. It landed. Darius felt it land because it was true, and the things that are true land differently than the things that aren't. Sujin lowered her phone. Whatever she had learned from the financial institution, she had absorbed it, and she set the phone face down on the table with the deliberate gesture of someone who is done verifying and has moved on to assessing. The transfers are registered, she said to the table, not to Darius specifically. They're valid. She looked at Naomi, a long look, the calculating kind. Which means nothing changes tonight, Darius said. The transfers stand. Darius, his mother's voice. And now the composure had something else in it, something he recognized from his childhood. The very specific frequency she used when she was no longer performing patience and had arrived at genuine emotion, which was rare enough that it always got his attention. I did not go to that hospital room to hurt her. I went because I believed she deserved to know the truth of her situation. I went because nobody else in this family was willing to be honest with her. And yes, I was cruel in how I said it, I know that. She stopped. But you have sat in this chair tonight and shown us all what you've done with the business. And I'm asking you now, in front of everyone, when did you last sit in a chair beside her? Not last night, before last night. When? The question sat in the room. Darius did not answer it. Not because he didn't have the answer. He had been circling the answer since the car that morning. But the answer, 6 weeks, maybe 8, maybe he had not sat in a room with Naomi and been fully present without something else pulling at him for the better part of 2 months, was not the kind of answer that could be spoken in this room without confirming everything his mother had just said. He had come here to expose his family. His family had exposed him. Excuse me, Naomi's voice, clear, quiet. The voice she used, he realized, when she had decided that what was happening around her had gone on long enough without her participation. Every head turned. She was looking at Sun-hee, looking at her directly, across the long table, with an expression that was not rage and not hurt, and not the careful diplomatic neutrality she had performed at every family gathering for 3 years. It was something Darius had not seen on Naomi's face in a very long time. It was the look she had worn on that first dinner when she had looked at him and said something true without decorating it. Everything you said in that hospital room, Naomi said to Sun-hee, landed exactly as you intended it to. You're good at what you do. I'll give you that. She didn't blink. And everything you just said in this room, about the report, about Darius, about what the marriage has been, some of that is also true. I'm not going to argue the true parts. She paused. But I need you to understand something. I'm sitting in this chair, in this room, tonight, with an IV mark on my arm and a fever that broke at noon, not because Darius made me. I'm sitting here because I decided to be here. And that is the first decision I have made in this family in 3 years that nobody negotiated me into or out of. She looked around the table. Byungjun, Sujin, Minjun, the advisors. You called me replaceable. You just said I damaged the family image. You said removing me would be best for everyone. She let that sit. I heard you. I want you to know I heard every word. She looked back at Sun Hee. And I want you to know that I'm not leaving because you said it. The room held still. I'm not leaving, Naomi said. And I'm not staying. I'm deciding for the first time. She looked at Darius. And I'm not ready to tell you what I've decided yet. Darius looked at his wife. He had walked into this room believing he had constructed something careful and irrevocable, a demonstration of power deployed precisely, a trap his family would walk into willingly and find themselves unable to exit with dignity intact. He had arrived with the architecture fully drawn, and somewhere between his mother reading a clinical report aloud and Naomi speaking in the steady voice of a woman who had stopped asking for permission, the architecture had dissolved, not destroyed, changed, become something he had not designed and could not entirely map. He had given Naomi a choice. He had not anticipated that she would make it in front of everyone, including him, before he was ready to hear it. What followed was not a resolution. The room began to fracture, Byungjun attempting to re-anchor the conversation to the legal transfers, Sujin making calculated noises about mediation, the senior advisors conferring in low voices about what the restructuring meant for contracts already in motion. His mother remained at the far end of the table and said nothing more, which was a statement of its own kind. Darius did not engage with any of it. He was looking at the folder in the center of the table. The restructuring documents, the beneficiary transfers, the voting block changes, all of it registered and valid and irrevocable. He had built a very thorough architecture of consequence for his family, and it had somehow, in the space of 45 minutes, become less significant than 3 sentences from a sick woman who had decided to stop being managed. Park appeared at the dining room door at 9:45. The signal. Naomi needed to be back at the hospital by 10. Darius stood. He looked at the table and at his uncle, his cousin, the advisors, his mother, and he said, with the particular evenness of a man who has said everything he intended to say and is not interested in extension, the transfers stand. Jung will be available to answer structural questions beginning tomorrow morning. Whatever you need to discuss among yourselves, discuss it. He looked at his mother last. And the next time anyone in this family has something to say about my wife, they say it to me first. He did not wait for responses. He walked to Naomi's chair and she was already standing, and they left the dining room the way they had entered it, together, at her pace, and behind them the room erupted again into the overlapping voices of people trying to figure out what had just happened and what it meant and what came next. In the car, Naomi sat with her head back against the headrest and her eyes closed. The city moved past the windows. Park drove. No one spoke for 5 full minutes. Then Naomi said, without opening her eyes, "Your mother is not wrong about all of it." "I know," Darius said. "She was cruel. She was also not entirely wrong." "I know." Naomi opened her eyes. She looked at the ceiling of the car, the report, the stress indicators, the isolation. She stopped. "I knew something was wrong with me physically. I didn't let myself think about why." She paused. "I kept telling myself it was just how things were, that I just needed to try harder, find a way to fit better." Darius said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would not be either a justification or an apology, and she deserved neither right now. Justifications were dishonest, and apologies were too small. "I need to ask you something," she said. She turned her head to look at him. Her face in the moving light of the city was very tired and very clear, the tiredness of someone who has burned through the last of a particular resource. "And I need you to answer it without thinking about how it sounds." "Okay. Did you do all of this tonight? The transfers, the meeting, bringing me into that room? Did you do it for me? Or did you do it because your mother embarrassed you in that corridor and you needed to respond to that? The car was quiet except for the engine and the city outside. Darius Kwon sat with that question. He turned it over. He looked at it honestly, which was harder than it sounded, because the honest answer was not clean. The honest answer was both. He had done it because of the corridor and the sick fury of standing there and hearing what his mother said. And he had done it because of Naomi and the folder and the IV mark and 6 weeks of absence that he had dressed up as necessity. And he had done it because somewhere in that plastic hospital chair, he had understood that the way he showed care, through logistics, through resources, through management, had not been enough. And he had responded the only way he knew how, which was to construct something large and deliberate and irrevocable. He had done all of it, and it had still not been quite the right thing. Both, he said. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. At least that's honest, she said. She turned back to the window. The hospital lights were coming up ahead, the familiar fluorescent wash of the entrance. Park slowed the car. I meant what I said in there, Naomi said. I'm deciding. I don't know yet what I'm deciding. She looked at the hospital entrance. But I need you to understand that the thing I'm deciding is not whether the Kwon family accepts me. I stopped needing that a long time ago. She looked at him. What I'm deciding is whether you and I are actually two people who know each other, because I'm not sure anymore that we are. The car stopped. Naomi reached for the door handle. Naomi, Darius said. She looked back at him. He had, in his life, said many things in the right order with the right architecture and the right timing. He had said things that moved rooms and moved money and moved men who did not want to be moved. I was looking at his wife in the entrance light of a hospital at 9:58 at night, and he could not find the right order for any of the things he needed to say. I don't know how to do this differently yet, he said. I know I need to. I don't know how yet. It was possibly the most unguarded thing he had said to another person in 10 years. Naomi looked at him. That, she said quietly, is the first thing you've said to me in 3 years that I actually believe. She got out of the car. Darius watched her walk through the hospital entrance. He watched until the doors closed behind her. He sat in the back of the car in the quiet and the stillness, and Park did not move, did not speak, did not ask where next, because Park understood after 11 years when a man needed a minute. Darius looked at his hands. The transfers were done. The family was in chaos. His mother had done the one thing he hadn't wargamed. She had made him the subject of the exposure he had designed for everyone else. His wife was walking back into a hospital room to sleep with an IV in her arm and a decision she hadn't made yet, and a marriage that had been, by clinical documentation, making her sick. He had spent 24 hours building the most deliberate, thorough response of his life. And he was sitting in a car outside a hospital, understanding that the thing Naomi actually needed could not be built in 24 hours, could not be structured or transferred or registered with a notary. It required something he had been treating as a luxury, being present, consistently, without an exit, not as management, as a person. He had exactly the amount of time it would take Naomi to recover, to make her decision, and to either sign those papers or not. And he did not know how long that was, and he could not control it. And for a man who had spent his entire adult life converting uncertainty into manageable architecture, not being able to control the timeline of the most important thing in his life was the most frightening thing that had happened to him in years. Park, he said. Yes. He started to say, take me home. What came out instead was, is there a chair in the hospital, besides her room? Park was quiet for a moment. The plastic one, sir. As far as I know, it's still there. Darius opened the car door. Then I'll be back when she's discharged, he said. He got out. He buttoned his coat against the cold. He looked at the hospital entrance. He thought about everything he didn't know how to do yet, and everything he was going to have to learn without a script, and without a contingency, and without the particular armor of appearing to have already decided. He walked toward the doors. They opened. And for the first time in a very long time, Darius Kwon walked into a room without knowing what would happen when he got there, and he did not turn back. He sat in the plastic chair again. Same chair, same spine awareness after 20 minutes, same low lighting, and the same sound of the IV drip counting out its small patient seconds. Naomi had looked at him when he came back through the door. Not surprised exactly, but something adjacent to surprised. The expression of someone who had expected to be alone and had prepared for it and now had to revise. She didn't ask why he came back. He didn't explain. He sat in the chair and she lay in the bed, and they were quiet together for a long time, which was different from the silence they'd had for months. That silence had been two people in parallel, running separate systems that occasionally intersected. This silence was something else, the kind that happens after things have been said that can't be unsaid, and the air still has the shape of them. Around midnight, she fell asleep. He stayed. Around 2, he got a call from Byung-jun that he declined. Then another from a number he didn't recognize that he also declined, which meant Byung-jun was now using other people's phones, which meant the chaos at the estate had not resolved into anything calm. He turned the phone face down on his knee and watched the window and thought about the medical report. The clinical language, stress indicators, isolation, inadequate support structures within the immediate household environment. He had read enough clinical documents in his life to know that language like that was not imprecise. It was chosen carefully. It was chosen to say something specific while remaining defensible. What it was saying specifically was that the environment Naomi had been living in had made her body stop functioning correctly. That the body keeps a different kind of record than the mind. That you can tell yourself you're fine for months, and your immune system will disagree, and it will be right. He sat with that for a long time. At some point he slept. Not intentionally. He came back to consciousness at 5:40 with his neck at a wrong angle and the particular cold that settles into plastic furniture in the early morning hours. And for a moment he didn't remember where he was, and then he did. Naomi was awake. She was looking at him. "Your neck," she said. "It's fine." "It's not. You're going to be in pain all day." "I've been in pain before." She looked at him for a moment. Something in her expression shifted, not softened exactly, but moved, like a window that has been closed for a long time opening an inch. "There's a pillow in the closet," she said. "The nurses brought an extra." He got the pillow. He did not go back to the chair. He pulled it slightly closer and he sat down, and he put the pillow behind his neck, and he looked at his wife in the low hospital morning light, and neither of them said anything for a while. "They called you last night," she said. Not a question. "Yes." "Byung-jun? And others." "What are they saying?" "I don't know. I didn't answer." She absorbed this. "You're going to have to deal with it. Later." "Darius, later," he said again, not dismissively, just clearly. "Right now I'm here." She looked at him with the measuring look she had, the one that was checking whether he meant it literally or whether it was a thing he was saying. He held still under it. He had learned, somewhere in the last 36 hours, that the right response to Naomi checking whether he meant something was to simply mean it and let her check. She looked away first, out the window. The sky was doing the same thing it had done 2 mornings ago. That early gray, the city not yet decided about the day. "When I was growing up," she said, not to him specifically, more to the window, "my mother used to say that the hardest thing about loving difficult people is that you can see who they could be. And sometimes you love that version more than the one that's actually in the room with you." She paused. "I thought about that a lot. In the Kwon house. In the first year." Another pause. "I thought about it when you weren't there." He didn't interrupt. "I don't think I loved a version of you that didn't exist," she said. "I think you're actually that person. I just don't think you knew how to be him and also be everything else you had to be." She finally looked at him. "But not knowing how is not the same as it not being your fault." "I know," he said. "I need you to know that I know you know," she said. "Because men say, 'I know,' to close a conversation. I need you to know it the way I've been knowing things, the way it stays with you." He thought about the folder, about the 8 weeks, about the empty chair at family dinners while Naomi sat at the guest end of the table and smiled the careful smile of someone performing belonging she didn't feel. About his mother's voice in the corridor saying, "Even your own husband has grown tired of you," and the fact that those words had landed on ground that had already been prepared for them. "I know it the way it stays," he said. They sat with that. The day arrived slowly around them, the light changing, the hospital coming to life in its institutional way, footsteps in the corridor, the distant sound of a cart, a nurse checking in at 6:30 and raising her eyebrows slightly at the man in the chair, before arranging her face into professional neutrality. At 7:15, Darius left to deal with the calls. He went to the car. He sat in the back. He went through the messages. Byung-jun had called 6 times total. The voicemails were a progression, first confused, then demanding, then conciliatory, then back to demanding. Then, in the last one, left at 4 in the morning, something that had been stripped of all its professional coding and was just an old man's anger, raw and specific. He said Darius had no right. He said the family had given him everything. He said a man who throws away his inheritance over a woman who would never understand what it cost to build it didn't deserve either of them. Darius listened to it twice. He called Byung-jun back. His uncle answered on the second ring. Finally, "I have 5 minutes," Darius said. "Say what you need to say." A sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Say what I need to say, after what you did last night." "Yes, 5 minutes." Darius. The anger had reorganized itself into something more structured since the 4 a.m. voicemail. You restructured 30 years of family holding arrangements in 24 hours. You transferred voting authority to a woman who may or may not still be married to you next month. You humiliated your mother in front of the senior advisors, and you walked out. A pause. You cannot run an organization like this if you behave like this. I don't run it like this, Darius said. I ran it this way once. Because it was necessary. Necessary. The word came back loaded. Your definition of necessary has apparently expanded to include dismantling what your father built because your wife is unhappy. My father built half of what I built, Darius said. The rest is mine. And I'll do what I want with mine. The transfers... Stand, Darius said. I've already told you that. They're being challenged. Byung-jun's voice shifted into the particular register of a man delivering news he has been saving. Soo-jin has found a procedural basis. The restructuring authorization form uses the family holding company letterhead. There's an argument that the transfer required family council sign-off before individual action. Darius was quiet for 1 second. What argument? The 2019 Family Charter Amendment, Section 4, Article 9. Any structural change to entities bearing the Kwon family designation requires consent from a quorum of senior members. Soo-jin filed a challenge with the registration authority at 6 this morning. The information landed with the specific quality of a thing that has been planned carefully and timed deliberately, 6 in the morning, while he was sleeping in a plastic chair, while he had his phone face down. He said nothing for a moment. Darius, Byung-jun's voice changed again. Something almost paternal came into it, which Darius distrusted more than the anger. Come home. We can sit down. We can discuss this like the family we are. Whatever happened at the hospital, whatever your mother said, we can find our way through it. But you have to come to the table. I'll call you back, Darius said. He hung up. He called Jung. Jung answered with, I've already heard Soo-jin's challenge, Section 4, Article 9. He sounded like a man who had been awake since the challenge was filed, which meant Park had probably called him. It's not frivolous, Darius. The 2019 amendment is real. I drafted part of it. I should have flagged it yesterday. Can they block it? They can delay it. The challenge creates a review window of 30 to 90 days during which the transfers are technically in suspension. Not reversed. Suspended, meaning the old structure is the operational structure while the challenge is in review. How do we close the window? A pause. The cleanest path is a family council vote demonstrating that a quorum supports the restructuring. If you can get 4 of the 8 senior members to sign a consent agreement, the challenge fails. Another pause. Waited. The alternative is to challenge the 2019 amendment itself on the basis that it was improperly ratified. Was it? Possibly, but that's a 6-month legal process. Minimum. Darius looked at the hospital entrance. The morning foot traffic had started. People going in and out, visitors, medical staff, the particular anonymous movement of a public building that houses private pain. Get me the consent agreement drafted, he said. Have it ready by noon. He ended the call. He sat in the car. 4 of 8 senior members. Byung-jun was a no. Soo-jin had filed the challenge, which meant she was a no. Min-jun followed Soo-jin in most things, which meant probably a no. His mother was... He stopped at his mother and held the thought there for a moment like holding a coal. His mother had voted against him. His mother had been the one who had sat at that table and, in the same breath as exposing his failures, had handed Byung-jun and Soo-jin the language they needed to build a legal case. She had been thinking about this before the meeting. That was what he understood now, sitting in the car. The medical report. Accessing Naomi's file 6 days ago. Knowing the clinical language well enough to quote it from memory in a high-pressure room. His mother had not walked into last night's meeting unprepared. She had prepared for exactly the meeting that happened, including the version where Darius arrived with the restructuring documents. She had known him long enough to know he would come in with something irreversible, and she had built a counter-architecture. She had spent 40 years studying her son, and she had used everything she knew. He sat with the specific feeling of having been outmaneuvered by someone who loved him. It was a particular kind of thing, that feeling. It didn't feel like defeat from an enemy. It felt worse than that. It felt like finding out the house you grew up in has a structural flaw that was always there and you just didn't know to look for it. He got out of the car. He needed to think, and he thought better moving, so he walked. Not far. Around the side of the hospital, along the service road, the route that had nobody on it at 7:30 in the morning, just the bare trees and the cold and the city sounds from the street beyond. He walked, and he counted what he had. He needed 4 votes. He had, potentially, 3 senior members who might be persuadable, older advisors who respected him and had no direct financial stake in blocking the transfers. He needed a 4th. Without a 4th, the review window stayed open and the old structure remained operational for up to 90 days, and his family spent those 90 days trying to find a more permanent reversal. There was one person who could give him the 4th vote and close the window immediately, who had standing as a senior family member, who had, technically, by marriage, a seat at the council table. Naomi. He stopped walking. He stood on the service road in the cold and he looked at the side wall of the hospital and he thought about what it would mean to ask her. She was in a hospital bed. She had a decision she hadn't made yet about whether she was staying in this marriage. She had just sat through a family meeting where people called her replaceable and her mother-in-law read her medical file aloud like evidence. And the thing he was now considering, the next move, the move that would resolve the legal challenge, the move that closed the structural window his family had engineered, required him to go back upstairs and ask his wife to vote in favor of her own uncertain position in the family he hadn't protected her from. He walked back inside. He did not go directly to room 412. He went to the 4th floor family lounge at the end of the corridor, which was empty at this hour. 3 chairs, a coffee machine that looked like it had been purchased in 2009 and not cleaned since, a window that looked at a ventilation structure on the adjacent building. He sat in one of the chairs. He was trying to figure out how to ask her and whether he should, and whether asking her was using her in the way he had spent the last 3 years not using her, but also using her, and the circularity of that was making his head hurt in a way that had nothing to do with sleep deprivation. He heard footsteps in the corridor. Not Naomi. She was not supposed to be up and walking. He looked toward the door. Park appeared in the lounge entrance. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. He set one on the table beside Darius without being asked. He sat in the chair across from him. Darius looked at him. "How long have you been here?" Darius asked. "Since about 5, Park said. "You didn't have to—" "I know." They drank the coffee. It was bad coffee. Hospital machine coffee at 7:30 in the morning, bitter and slightly too hot, and absolutely necessary. "Soo-jin," Darius said. "Yes," Park said. "I should have been watching that channel more carefully. I knew she'd called someone at the financial institution. I didn't track the charter angle." "Neither did I." "Young should have—" "I moved too fast," Darius said. "I gave them a window by moving too fast. That's mine." Park looked at him. He had the expression he wore when he was calculating whether to say the thing he was thinking. He usually decided against it. This time, he didn't. "For what it's worth," he said, "I've been with you for 11 years. I have never seen you make a move for a reason that wasn't clear to me. Last night, the family meeting, bringing Naomi in, the folder, I didn't understand the logic until I was sitting in the car outside and it came together." He paused. "I understood it when she spoke." Darius looked at his coffee. "She's good," Park said simply. "She's a good person, whatever the family says." "I know that." "You knew it before last night?" "Yes." "Then why—" "Because knowing someone is good," Darius said, "and knowing how to show up for someone who is good are not the same skill. I was very good at the first one." He set down the coffee. "I was not good at the second." Park nodded. He finished his coffee. He stood. The consent agreement. Jung is sending a draft. 3 of the 8, Kim Chul-soo, Advisor Bayek, and Old Councilman. Oh, I think they can be reached. They've always been yours more than they've been the family's. And the 4th. Park was quiet. I know, Darius said. Do you want me to? No, Darius said. I'll do it. He went back to room 412. Naomi had been moved to a sitting position by one of the nurses and was looking at something on her phone with the expression of someone reading messages they had been avoiding. She looked up when he came in. She read his face. What happened? She said. He sat in the chair. He told her. The charter amendment. Sujin's challenge. The review window. The 4 votes. He told her without softening the architecture of it, without editorializing, just the structure, what had been done, what it required, what the options were. When he finished, she was quiet. Then she said, You need my vote. I didn't say that to ask you. Darius. Her voice was level. You told me all of that. You didn't tell me the options for fighting the charter amendment itself, or the 6-month timeline, or the other angles. You told me specifically about the 4 votes. So, yes, you need my vote. He met her eyes. I need you to understand that I'm not asking you. I'm telling you what's happening. What you do with it is your decision. Everything is my decision this week, she said. Not bitterly, observationally. That's a change. She set her phone down. She looked at the window. If I vote, if I sign the consent agreement, the transfers stand. The ones that include me as primary beneficiary. The ones that give me controlling interest in the legitimate companies. Yes. And if I don't vote? The review window stays open for 90 days. They'll spend those 90 days building a case for permanent reversal. With my mother in the room, they'll find something. And if they reverse it, then the structure goes back to what it was. And where does that leave me? He looked at her. Exactly where you were 3 days ago, before the hospital, before any of this. Naomi sat with that. She turned her phone over in her hands once, then set it on the tray. She looked at him with the expression she wore when she was making a decision, not the performance of deciding, the actual interior process of it, visible on her face in small ways if you knew what to look for, and he was realizing he knew more of what to look for than he had acknowledged. I have a condition, she said. He waited. I'll sign the consent agreement, she said, but I want something first, not the business, not the properties, something else. Tell me. I want your mother in this room, Naomi said. Before I sign anything, I want her here, in this room, without the table between us and without an audience. Not to apologize. I'm not asking for her apology. I stopped needing her apology somewhere around day 3 in this hospital. She looked at him directly. I want to look at her and say what I need to say without performing anything for anyone. And I want her to hear it. That's what I want. Darius looked at his wife. He thought about calling his mother. He thought about what Sun Hee Kwan's response would be to being asked to come to a hospital room by her son's wife on the morning after the most significant family rupture in 20 years. He thought about the 61 years of architecture his mother had built inside herself and what it would take to get her through that door. Okay, he said. He called her. She picked up on the 3rd ring. He did not explain on the phone. He said, I need you to come to Saint-Chiel, room 412, now. He paused. Not for me. For her. A long silence on the other end. Then his mother said, I'll be there in 40 minutes. She arrived in 35. She walked into room 412 in her coat, no assistant, no preparation visible on her surface, just the 61 years of herself. The woman who had buried a husband and outlasted 2 business partners, and sat at the end of a table and said, removing her would be best for everyone the night before. She looked at Naomi in the bed. She looked at Darius in the chair. Darius stood. He moved to the corner of the room, not out, not hovering, just back, making the room, as much as possible, between 2 people. Sun Hee looked at her son's positioning. She understood what he was doing. She moved to the chair he had vacated. She sat. She and Naomi looked at each other. The room was very quiet. You came, Naomi said. My son asked me to. I'm asking you, Naomi said. Not him. Me. She held Sun Hee's gaze without hostility and without the careful diplomacy she had used at every family gathering for 3 years. I know you think I'm weak. I know you think I don't understand what it costs to carry the weight that your family carries. You might even be right about some of that. She paused. But I need you to hear something from me. Not through Darius, not through a legal document, from me directly. Sunhee's expression had not changed, but she was listening. Whatever else she was listening. You went to that hospital room, Naomi said, and you said things you knew would land in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. And I've thought about why. I've had a lot of time to think this week. She looked at the older woman. I think you were scared. Something moved across Sunhee's face. Fast. Gone. Not of me, Naomi said. Of what you saw happening to your son. You watched him build something and pour himself into it, and you watched what it was costing him, and you decided, the way you decide everything, that the most efficient solution was to remove the variable that was costing him the most. And I was the variable. She paused. I understand that logic. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. Sunhee said nothing. I'm not leaving, Naomi said. I told you that last night, and I'm telling you now. Not because of the business arrangements, not because of what Darius has done in the last 2 days. She looked at Sunhee squarely. Because I made a choice 3 years ago that I made with intention, and I don't walk away from my intentions because the conditions got hard. She breathed. But I will not spend another 3 years being a variable someone is calculating around. I will not sit at the end of that table. I will not perform belonging for an audience that has already decided I don't. She stopped. Let it land. So I need you to decide, not for Darius, not for the family, for yourself, whether you can be in a room with me and see a person, not a variable, not a problem, a person. The room held the silence. Sunhee Kwon sat in the plastic chair that her son had been sleeping in for 2 nights, and she looked at her daughter-in-law, and she was quiet for so long that Darius, in the corner of the room, felt his own breathing become a thing he was aware of. Then Sunhee said, You're not what I expected. I know, Naomi said. I don't mean that kindly, Sunhee said. I mean I built an expectation of who you were, and I enforced it, and you're different than that expectation. She stopped. For a woman who used language as precisely as a scalpel, the hesitation was significant. What I said at this hospital, 3 nights ago, the last thing, about Darius. Yes. I said it to damage you, Sunhee said. I said it because I knew it would land. I knew exactly where it would land. She looked at her hands, which were folded in her lap with complete composure, and then she looked back at Naomi. That was not a strategy. That was cruelty, and I knew it when I said it. The room was very still. It was not an apology. Naomi had not asked for an apology. But it was something rarer than an apology from Sunhee Kwon. It was an accurate accounting, a woman saying clearly, I knew what I was doing and I did it anyway. No justification, no reframing, just the truth of it, stated plainly, in a hospital room with no audience to perform for. Naomi looked at her for a long moment. Thank you, she said. Sunhee's jaw tightened slightly, then released. She stood. She straightened her coat. She was at the door when Naomi said, The consent agreement, for the transfers. Sunhee stopped. You have a vote, Naomi said. Senior family member. Your signature on the consent agreement closes the challenge. She paused. I'm going to sign it. I'd like you to consider it. Sunhee did not turn around. She stood at the door with her back to the room for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then she left. The door closed. Darius came out of the corner. Naomi exhaled. Long. The kind of exhale that has been held for a while. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment, not crying, just holding something. He sat in the chair. Okay, she said after a moment, get me the consent agreement. He called Jung at 11. The document arrived electronically at 11:40. Naomi read every page. He didn't rush her. He sat in the chair and watched her read it with the focused attention she brought to things she took seriously, which was most things. And then she signed it. She handed the phone back to him. 3 votes plus mine, she said. That's 4. The challenge closes. Yes. And your mother? He looked at the door his mother had left through. He thought about the woman who had arrived in 35 minutes when he'd said for her, not for him. Who had sat in this chair and said, I knew it when I said it without being asked to. who had left without promising anything. "I don't know," he said. At 2 that afternoon, Jung called. "The 3 advisors signed the consent," he said. "Kim Chul-soo, advisor Bayek, Councilman O. That's 4 with Naomi. The challenge should close by end of business." Darius was standing in the corridor outside Naomi's room, where he had taken the call. He closed his eyes for 1 second. "Good. There's something else," Jung said. "A 5th signature came in, about an hour ago, through my office directly." A pause. "Madam Sun-hee Kwon. She signed the consent agreement." Darius was very still. "She didn't include a note," Jung said. "Just the signature. Properly witnessed." Another pause. "I thought you should know." He ended the call. He stood in the corridor. The hospital moved around him, a gurney going past, 2 nurses talking quietly at the end of the hall, the elevator opening and closing, the ordinary movement of a place that housed extraordinary things. He put the phone in his pocket. He pushed open the door to room 412. Naomi was sitting up, looking at her phone. She looked up at him. She read his face again. She was very good at reading his face, he was realizing. She had probably been very good at it for 3 years, and he had not known she was doing it because he had not been paying attention to what she was reading. "What?" she said. He looked at his wife. "My mother signed the consent agreement," he said. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at her phone. She set it down. She was quiet, looking at the window, at the gray November afternoon beyond it, and he could not tell exactly what she was feeling, but he could see the shape of it, something complicated, something that had not resolved yet into a single clean emotion, which was probably appropriate, because there was nothing clean about any of this. "When I'm discharged," she said, "I'm not going back to the Kwon estate." "I know," he said. "I want us to find a place," she said. "Not yours, not your family's, not named after anything that was already decided before I was part of it." She looked at him. "A place that's ours." "Yes," he said. "And I want to go to the community kitchen," she said, "in Mapo. I volunteer there on Saturday mornings. I haven't been in 2 months." She said it not as a request for permission, just as information. "This is a thing I do. This is a thing I'm going back to. I want you to come with me." He looked at her. "Saturday mornings," he said. "Yes." "I don't know how to do anything in a kitchen," he said. "I know," she said. "They'll teach you." He almost smiled. He felt it happen in the muscles of his face, this near smile, and he let it. "Okay," he said. Outside the window, the afternoon was making its way toward evening. The city was doing what the city did, indifferent and enormous and full of people negotiating the terms of their lives in hospital rooms and cars and family estates and kitchens. The whole ongoing human project of trying to be present for the people who mattered before you ran out of time to be. The transfers stood. The challenge was closing. His mother had signed. But none of that was the thing sitting in his chest right now as he looked at his wife in the low afternoon light. The thing sitting in his chest was smaller than all of that. It was the community kitchen on a Saturday morning and someone teaching him how to be useful in a room where usefulness was measured differently than he was used to. It was Naomi saying about a place that didn't exist yet. He sat in the plastic chair. His spine registered its objection. He ignored it. He was staying. Naomi was discharged on a Thursday. Not with fanfare, not with the family assembled or flowers sent ahead, or any of the architecture Darius might have arranged 6 months ago to signal that something significant was happening. She walked out of St. Sheil Hospital at 2 in the afternoon with a bag Park had packed, a follow-up appointment card in her coat pocket, and Darius beside her. Not holding her arm, not steering her, just beside her, at her pace, the way he had walked her into the Kwon estate 4 nights ago that felt like a different chapter of a different life. The air outside was cold and sharp in the way November air is sharp when you've been breathing recycled hospital atmosphere for 10 days and your body has forgotten what weather feels like. Naomi stopped on the steps and breathed it, just stood there and breathed. Darius stopped with her. He didn't say anything. He waited while she acquainted herself with the cold. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They got in the car. The apartment Park had arranged was in Yongsan. Not the Mapo apartment that had been Naomi's name on the lease and had always felt, despite that, like a property in the Kwon portfolio rather than a home. This was a different building, a different district, smaller than anything the Kwon name was associated with, an eighth-floor unit with windows that faced east, and a kitchen that had been someone else's kitchen, ordinary and unstaged, with a coffee maker that was not new and a view of the neighborhood rather than a skyline designed to impress. When they walked in the first time, Naomi stood in the living room and turned slowly, taking inventory the way she took inventory of rooms now. Carefully, without hurry, looking for whatever it was she was looking for. "It needs things," she said. "Yes," Darius said. "I want to choose them." "I know. That's why there's nothing here yet." She looked at him. Something moved across her face that was not quite a smile but occupied the same territory. She walked to the east window and looked at the neighborhood below. The street, the ordinary traffic of an ordinary block, a woman walking a small dog, a delivery man parking his bike, the unremarkable persistence of people going about things. She put her hand on the glass. The glass was cold. "I need a few days," she said, "to just be here, before anything else." "Okay." "I mean, really nothing else," she said. "No family conversations, no legal calls, no one from the estate." "Okay," he said again. She turned and looked at him with the checking expression. He held still. She turned back to the window. They ordered food that night from a place 2 blocks away. They ate it at the counter because there was no table yet, sitting on the 2 stools that had come with the unit. And they ate in the particular comfortable quiet of people who have been through something together and are now on the other side of it, not fully, not cleanly, but enough to sit in a room without bracing. Darius ate something he could not identify and did not ask about. It was good. He finished all of it. "What is this?" he finally said when the container was empty. "Spicy rice cake stew. Tteokbokki. The place downstairs does it with fish cake." Naomi looked at his empty container. "You've never had it?" "Apparently not." "It's not exactly—" she started, then stopped. "What?" "I was going to say it's not exactly Kwon Estate food." She said it without bitterness, just noting. "No," he said. "It's better." She looked at him. The territory of a smile again, slightly wider this time. She looked back at her food. "Tomorrow," she said, "I want to go to the market. The one at the end of the block. I saw it when we came in." "Okay." "You don't have to come." "I want to come." She considered this. "You'll be bored." "Then I'll be bored," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at her container. "The coffee maker needs filters," she said. "If you're coming, that's what you're in charge of. Find the filters." "I can do that," he said. They went to the market in the morning. It was a small covered market, the kind that has existed in the same location for decades, and has the particular lived-in quality of a place that has never needed to announce itself. Naomi moved through it with the ease of someone who knew markets, who had been going to markets her whole life, not performing the knowledge, just having it, stopping to look at things without the social calculation of someone who was worried about being observed. Darius found the filters. He also spent 7 minutes in front of a display of dried goods that he could not entirely identify, reading the labels with the concentration of a man who was accustomed to being the most informed person in any room and was temporarily not. A woman in her 70s who ran the stall watched him for a moment and then came over and, without being asked, explained 3 of the items in practical terms: what they were for, how long they kept, what to do with them. She did not recognize him. She was just helping a man who looked like he needed help. He thanked her. He meant it in a way he hadn't meant to thank you in a while. Naomi appeared at his elbow with a bag that had things in it. She looked at what the woman had explained to him. She looked at his face. "You bought something." She explained what it was. Naomi looked at the older woman, who had already moved back to her stall. She looked at Darius. "You're going to need to tell me what you think you're going to do with jujubes." She said they're good in tea. Darius. "I'll learn," he said. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and kept walking through the market, and he fell in beside her, and they finished the market in the ordinary way of 2 people who are figuring out the shared grammar of a new space, neither one of them entirely sure of the rules yet, both of them trying. On the 3rd day, Byung-jun called. Naomi was in the other room when the call came in. Darius took it in his kitchen, standing at the counter with the jujubes on the shelf behind him that he had not yet figured out how to use. The challenge has been withdrawn, Byung-jun said. He said it like a man reading a weather report. Flat, informational, effect suppressed. The registration authority confirmed the consent quorum this morning. The transfers stand. I know, Darius said. Jung told me yesterday. A pause. Your mother's signature, Byung-jun said. I wasn't consulted. No. I'd like to understand the reasoning. I don't think she owes you a reasoning, Darius said. She's a senior member. She has standing. She signed. Another pause. Longer. When Byung-jun spoke again, some of the flat reporting quality was gone, and something older and tireder had come through instead. What happens now to the family council, the operating structure? The legitimate businesses run the way they've been running. The council meets quarterly as it always has. My voting structure is what it is. Darius paused. What changes is who has authority over my household. The answer to that is, I do. And Naomi. And the others, Soo-jin, Min-jun. Their contracts are intact. I'm not interested in punishment. I'm interested in clarity. He paused. They know now what clarity looks like. Byung-jun was quiet for a moment. 30 years ago, he said, your father told me that the thing that would either make you or destroy you was that you were incapable of half measures. He said it admiringly. He also said it with some fear. A pause. He was right on both counts. Darius didn't respond to that. There wasn't anything to respond to. He thanked Byung-jun for calling and ended the call and stood in the kitchen for a moment with the phone in his hand. He thought about his father. Not often. Not in the reconstructive way some people thought about their dead. Building a better version in memory. His father had been a specific man with specific qualities, some of which Darius had inherited, and some of which he had deliberately not. And the mixing of admiration and clear-eyed appraisal that came with thinking about him was an old and familiar feeling. His father had built the foundation, Darius had built the rest. The family had spent 20 years treating the foundation as the more important contribution. He put the phone down. Naomi appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had heard enough of the call to understand the shape of it. She looked at him. Done? Mostly, he said. Mostly? She repeated. What's the rest? He looked at the shelf with the jujubes. I need to talk to my mother. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Not for the business. No, not for the business. She came into the kitchen. She moved past him and filled the coffee maker with water, the ordinary gesture of someone who has begun to inhabit a space, and she said without looking at him, Okay, go talk to her. He went to the estate that afternoon. His mother was in the garden, which was unusual. She rarely used the garden in winter. She was wearing a coat and she was sitting on the stone bench near the empty fountain with nothing in her hands, which was unusual also, because Sun Hee Kwon was not a person who sat without purpose. She looked up when she heard him on the path. She did not appear surprised. He sat on the bench beside her, not across from her. Beside her, the way he had sat when he was very young and the bench had been enormous, and the garden had seemed to go on longer than it did. They sat for a moment without speaking. A bird moved in the branches of the bare tree at the garden's edge. Neither of them looked at it. You signed the consent agreement, he said. Yes. I didn't ask you to. No, she said. Naomi did. He looked at her profile. She was looking at the empty fountain with the particular expression she wore when she was thinking about something she had not finished thinking about yet. What she said to me in that room, Sun Hee said, about the variable. She stopped, started again. I have been thinking about it for 3 days. And? And she was right, his mother said, simply, without the careful linguistic scaffolding she usually built around admissions of any kind. She was entirely right about the logic, about what I was doing and why. She paused. I don't think I was wrong to be worried about you, about the marriage, about what it was costing both of you. She looked at the fountain. I was wrong about what the solution was. Darius said nothing. She said she didn't need my apology, Sun Hee said. She doesn't. I know, she was right about that also. A pause. But I find that I want to give it anyway. Not for her. I understand she's past needing it. But because the thing I said in that hospital room, the last thing, that was not strategy. I told her it was cruelty, and I knew it. And I have not been someone who allowed myself to be cruel without purpose, in my own accounting of myself. That is what has been sitting with me. She finally turned and looked at him. I don't like who I was in that room, Darius. It was the most direct thing his mother had said to him in perhaps 20 years. He sat with it. The family, he said. Byungjun, Soo-jin. They'll manage, she said. They always manage. The Kwon family has survived worse dislocations than your restructuring. She said it without drama, just the clear assessment of a woman who had been watching this family operate for 40 years. What they won't survive is you losing the legitimate business because you're not paying attention to it, which is what will happen if what's happening between you and Naomi, doesn't stabilize. She looked at him. Not because she's a liability, because you are not functional when your private life is in chaos. You never have been. You just hide it better than most people. He almost smiled again. This time he let it happen. A small, actual smile. And his mother looked at it with an expression he could not entirely read, but which contained something he had not seen on her face in a long time. I'm going to ask her to have dinner with me, son, he said. Naomi, not at the estate. Somewhere she chooses. No agenda. No family business, she paused. She can say no. I want to ask. Darius looked at his mother. 61 years old, sitting on a cold stone bench in a winter garden with nothing in her hands, saying the thing that had probably cost her more than the consent agreement signature. You should ask her yourself, he said. Don't go through me. I know, son, he said. I'm telling you, not asking you to arrange it. He nodded. They sat for another moment. The jujubes, he said. His mother looked at him. What? Someone at the market told me to buy jujubes for tea. I don't know what to do with them. His mother looked at him for a long moment. Her expression did something he had not seen it do in so long that it took him a moment to recognize it. You simmer them with water and a little ginger, she said. For about 20 minutes. The water turns red. She paused. Your grandmother made it every winter. You used to drink 3 cups and refused to stop. He had not remembered that. And now he did. He left the estate at 4. Saturday came. The community kitchen in Mapo occupied the ground floor of a building that had been a textile warehouse in a previous life, and still had the bones of it. High ceilings, concrete floors, the particular acoustics of a large open space that absorbed sound rather than bouncing it. It operated twice a week, Saturday mornings and Wednesday evenings, and served anyone who came. No questions about circumstances or documentation or the conditions under which a person found themselves needing a free meal on a Saturday morning in November. Naomi had been volunteering here for 14 months. The coordinator, a woman named Mrs. Yoon, who was 67 and had apparently run the kitchen for 11 years, with the particular authority of someone who had decided this was her life's most important work, greeted Naomi with the kind of genuine warmth that made Darius understand immediately that Naomi had been something to these people in the months when she had been nothing to the Kwon family. Mrs. Yoon hugged her. She held on for a moment. She said something quietly in Naomi's ear that Darius could not hear, and Naomi nodded and pressed her hand once, briefly, before stepping back. Mrs. Yoon looked at Darius. Naomi said, "This is my husband. He's never done this before." Mrs. Yoon looked at him with the evaluating expression of a woman who has seen many people walk into her kitchen for the first time and has a quick and accurate system for assessing who will be useful and who will be in the way. "Can you chop?" she said. "I can learn," he said. "Good enough," Mrs. Yoon said. "Come with me." He was put at a long prep table with a young man named Ji-hoon, who was 22 and had clearly been coming here for a while and had the easy physicality of someone comfortable in kitchens. Ji-hoon showed him how to hold the knife properly without comment or condescension, just the straightforward practical transfer of information between two people with a task to complete, and then they chopped vegetables for 45 minutes while the kitchen around them moved and smelled like garlic and sesame oil, and the specific warmth of large-scale cooking. Darius was not good at it. His cuts were uneven. Ji-hoon corrected him twice without making it a thing, just more like this, and showing him, and moving on. Darius adjusted and adjusted again until his cuts were not good but were better than they had been. He could see Naomi across the kitchen, at the serving station, talking to Mrs. Yoon about something while they set up the line. She was wearing an apron and her hair was back and she was not performing anything. She was just there, in the particular fully present way she was in places where she felt she had a right to be. And watching her from across the kitchen, Darius understood something he should have understood a long time ago. This was who she was when nobody was weighing her worth, This was the person the Kwon family had been quietly, consistently, determinedly trying to reduce. He chopped an onion badly, and his eyes watered, and Ji-hoon wordlessly slid a bowl of water toward him without breaking his own rhythm, and Darius thought, the smallest kindnesses are the ones that accumulate. When the doors opened at 9, 63 people came in over the course of the next 2 hours. Darius had been moved to the serving line by then, beside a retired schoolteacher named Mr. Baek, who served rice with the kind of reliable generosity that suggested he had been doing it for years and intended to keep doing it. Darius served soup. He was told how much per portion by Mrs. Yoon in a tone that implied she trusted him to do it correctly once told, and he did it correctly. He said good morning to people, and some of them said good morning back, and some of them just held out their bowls, and some of them thanked him with the specific weight of people who were thanking him for something more than soup. He didn't look away from any of them. At 11, when the service was winding down and the kitchen was moving into cleanup, Naomi found him at the sink where he was washing a pot under the instruction of a teenage girl who had apparently been assigned pot duty and had accepted Darius as her assistant with the magnificent indifference of someone to whom his outside identity was completely irrelevant. Naomi leaned against the counter beside him. She was tired. He could see it, the good tired of having done something, not the depleted tired of the hospital. She watched him work. "How was the soup?" she said. "I didn't spill any of it." "That's a pass," she said. "First time, that's a pass." The teenage girl, without looking up from her own pot, said, "He was okay," in the tone of someone delivering an official assessment. Naomi looked at Darius. The territory of a smile had become an actual smile, the first full one he had seen from her in months. It changed her face in the specific way that real smiles change faces. Not the diplomatic smile, not the performing smile, but the kind that arrives because something is actually, simply, good. He held on to it for a moment. The fact of that smile, the evidence of it. They left the kitchen at 11:40. On the walk back to the car, Naomi said, "Mrs. Yoon wants you to come back next week." "She said that?" "She told me to tell you," she said, and I'm quoting directly, "his cuts were terrible, but he listened, so he can come back." "High praise," Darius said. "From Mrs. Yoon it genuinely is," Naomi said. They walked. The street was ordinary and cold and full of people. Naomi put her hands in her coat pockets. She did not take his arm, but she walked close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, which was its own kind of thing. "I want to talk about the divorce papers," she said. He kept walking. He didn't tense, or at least he tried not to. "Okay." "You signed them," she said. "In the hospital, at the estate meeting." "Yes." "You didn't fight me on them." "No." She was quiet for a moment, looking ahead at the street. "I spent a lot of time trying to figure out whether that was another strategy," she said. "Whether you signed them because you knew it would be the thing that made me not use them." He considered that. "Did it seem like a strategy?" "At first," she said. "Yes." She paused. "And then I kept thinking about it, and I decided it didn't matter whether it started as a strategy, because the reason you gave was true. If I stayed, you didn't want it to be because your name trapped me." She looked at the sidewalk ahead of them. "That was the first time you said something to me that was only for me. Not for the family, not for the situation, just for me." He didn't say anything. "I tore the papers up," she said. He knew she had torn her copy. She had done it in front of the family. "My copy is still technically valid," he said. "I know," she said. "I want you to tear it up." He stopped walking. She stopped beside him, on the sidewalk in the middle of a Saturday morning in Mapo, people moving around them, the ordinary, unremarkable flow of a neighborhood that had no idea what it was witnessing. "Not because it traps you," she said, "because I want to start something different, and I don't want the old papers to be the foundation of the new thing." He looked at his wife. She was looking at him with clear eyes, no performance, no careful diplomatic negotiation. Just Naomi Bennett Kwon, who had survived 10 days in a hospital and a family meeting and a mother-in-law reading her medical file out loud, who volunteered at a community kitchen on Saturday mornings, who had learned to fight for herself quietly, and then had learned, this week, that fighting loudly was also something she knew how to do, who had said about a place that didn't have a table yet. "Okay," he said. When they got home, he found the folder. It was in the inside pocket of the coat he had worn to the hospital that first night. Still there, because he had not taken it out, which was either carelessness or a version of not being ready to deal with it. He took it out. He opened it to his copy of the signed petition. He looked at it for a moment. He tore it in half. He tore it again. He put it in the kitchen waste. Naomi watched from the doorway. He turned. "I want to tell you something," he said. She waited. "I know how to acquire things," he said. "I know how to protect things once I have them. I know how to build structures that outlast the moment." He stopped. Made himself say the next part clearly. "I don't know how to be in something while I'm in it. I've been thinking about that since the hospital, since the plastic chair." He looked at her. "I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to default back to logistics when I should be sitting in the room. I'm going to manage something I should just be present for." He paused. "But I want you to tell me when I do it. Not protect me from knowing. Tell me." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. She pushed off the door frame and came into the kitchen. She opened the cabinet above the coffee maker and took down the jujubes and set them on the counter. "Show me how you're going to make this tea," she said. He looked at her. At the jujubes. "I only know the theory so far." "Then we'll figure out the practice," she said. She filled the kettle. She handed him a piece of ginger from the refrigerator, where Park had stocked things 3 days ago. She leaned against the counter beside him and watched him look at the ginger with the expression of a man who is genuinely uncertain what to do next and has decided that uncertainty is not something he needs to hide. "Thin slices," she said. "I think." "Thin slices," he said. He found the knife. He remembered what Ji-hoon had shown him about the grip. He cut the ginger in thin, imperfect slices, and Naomi watched without correcting him. And he put the slices in the pot with the jujubes and the water from the kettle, and they stood together in the kitchen of the apartment that had no table yet while the water began to heat. 3 weeks after that, the Kwon family had its quarterly gathering. Not the emergency council meeting, not the confrontation of the dining room at 9 p.m. The regular meeting, the one that had happened 4 times a year for decades, in the main room of the estate with the table that had always had Naomi somewhere near the decorative end. This time Darius arrived with Naomi beside him, and they sat where they sat at the last meeting, him at his position, her immediately to his right. Nobody said anything about the seating arrangement. Nobody moved to redirect it. Sujin was present. She had not spoken directly to Darius since the challenge was withdrawn, which he understood as a period of recalibration. Sujin was strategic enough to know that the moment for a certain kind of positioning had passed, and she was waiting to understand what the new landscape looked like before she moved again. He did not resent this. He understood it. It was the same thing he would have done. Minjun, who had said replaceable 6 weeks ago, with the confidence of a young man who had never considered the consequences of words, was seated 3 chairs down and spent most of the meeting looking at the table with the expression of someone who had been quietly processing an education. Byung-jun chaired the operational portion of the meeting as he always had. He was not warm, but he was professional, which was the version of peace Darius had expected and could work with. At the end of the operational review, Byung-jun set down his papers and looked at the table and said, in the flat tone of someone discharging an obligation, "We should acknowledge the new beneficiary structure in the operating record. For clarity." He looked at Naomi briefly and then back at his papers. Naomi Bennett Kwon now holds primary beneficiary standing in Darius's personal estate and controlling interest in the subsidiary legitimate companies. This is noted. He moved on. Naomi kept her expression neutral, but Darius felt the slight shift in how she was sitting. Not taller, not assertive, just settled. The way someone settles when the ground under them has been confirmed solid. At the end of the meeting, Sun-hee came to Naomi. Not in front of the full table. Afterward, in the hall, when people were dispersing. She came to her quietly, and she said, with the specific economy of a woman who had spent days choosing the right words, "I would like to have dinner, when you're willing, somewhere you choose." She paused. "No agenda." Naomi looked at her. "Thursday," Naomi said. "There's a place near the Mapo kitchen. It's not—" She paused. "It's not fancy." "I don't need fancy," Sun-hee said. Naomi looked at her for another moment, then she nodded. "Thursday." Sun-hee nodded. She moved away through the hall, and Darius, who had been standing close enough to hear, came to stand beside his wife. Naomi watched his mother go. Her expression was not warm, and it was not cold. It was the expression of someone who is in the middle of a long project that has no quick completion, who has learned that some things resolve not in moments but in years, and has made a kind of peace with the timeline. Thursday, Darius said. I'm not forgiving her on Thursday, Naomi said. I'm just having dinner. I know. Stop looking relieved. I'm not. He stopped. I'm a little relieved. She looked at him sideways. I know you are. She started walking toward the estate exit. Come on, we have to get a table. He walked beside her. A table. For the apartment. We've been eating at the counter for 3 weeks. We need a table. We could have park. We are going to go look at tables, Naomi said firmly, in the tone she used when she had already decided something and was informing rather than proposing. Today. Like people who live somewhere. Like people who live somewhere, he repeated. That's us now, she said. People who live somewhere. They left the estate. In the months that followed, the things that changed were not dramatic. They were small, consistent, sometimes difficult, and sometimes not. They found a table. Naomi chose it, he paid for it. They argued briefly and genuinely about where exactly to put it relative to the window, and they landed on a compromise that neither of them had initially proposed, which felt like an accurate representation of what they were learning to do. He went to the community kitchen most Saturdays. His cuts improved. Mrs. Yoon told Naomi eventually that he was useful, which was the highest compliment she had available. He took 3 fewer meetings a month and used the time differently. It was not a grand gesture. He did not announce it. He did not make it a thing. He just started doing it, and when Naomi noticed and asked, he said it was a recalibration, and she looked at him for a moment and then went back to what she was doing, which told him she had noted it and was waiting to see if it held. It held. The dinner with Sun-hee on Thursday was not a resolution. Nothing as tidy as that. It was 2 women at a small restaurant in Mapo eating jjajangmyeon and talking carefully and arriving by the end of it at something that was not warmth but was its precondition, the acknowledgement of each other as specific people rather than positions. Naomi told Darius afterward that his mother had eaten everything on her plate and complimented the noodles with genuine surprise, like someone who had not expected to find something good and wasn't sure what to do with that. She said she'd never had jjajangmyeon at a place like that, Naomi said. She said it the way people say something was better than they expected, when they can't quite figure out how to say they were wrong to not expect it. That's her version of a compliment, Darius said. I know that now, Naomi said. I'm noting it. They met again the following month, and the month after. The space between them closed not in leaps, but in small incremental reductions, which was the only way spaces that large actually close. Darius found the medical report one evening, going through a file he had not opened since the legal crisis resolved. Dr. Huang's preliminary assessment. He read it in full this time, all of it, the clinical language that his mother had weaponized in the dining room. He sat with the specific language of it for a long time. Stress indicators. Isolation. Inadequate support structures within the immediate household environment. The clinical conclusion. Patient's physical deterioration consistent with chronic psychological depletion over extended period, estimated duration 12 to 18 months. 12 to 18 months. He had been providing logistics and resources for 12 to 18 months while his wife's body recorded what his absence actually cost. He sat with that in the specific way Naomi had asked him to sit with things. Not long enough to perform the sitting, long enough for it to actually stay. He put the file away. He went to the kitchen. Naomi was at the table. They had found, over weeks of use, that the table was very good, that they sat at it differently than they had sat at the counter, with more room to breathe, more room to just be in the same space. She was reading something, one leg tucked under her, the posture of someone completely at home. He made tea. He made it correctly by now. The ginger, the jujubes, the 20 minutes, the water going the particular dark red color his mother had described, and his grandmother had made every winter. He brought 2 cups to the table and set one in front of Naomi without being asked, and sat down across from her. She picked up the cup without looking away from what she was reading, the automatic gesture of someone who has started to assume things will be there. He sat across from her and drank his tea and was present in the room, with her, in the specific daily ordinary way that was harder than any single dramatic gesture and more necessary than any of them. Sometime later, months, the year beginning to close into the particular cold that preceded the new year, the Kwon family held a gathering. Not a council, not emergency, not structured around crisis. A dinner, the kind the family had held twice a year before things had gone the way they went. The kind where family was just family in a room together. Naomi wore the dark coat. She wore it without armor underneath, which was different. She and Darius drove to the estate together, and they arrived together, and they walked in together, and the room had the quality that rooms have when something has shifted in them, and everyone is operating from the new coordinates without quite acknowledging that the old ones are gone. People rose when they came in, not all at once, not dramatically. The way people rise when they've recalculated something, and the recalculation has changed what they stand for and when. Byung-jun was already standing. He had been mid-conversation and simply didn't sit back down. Soo-jin rose without looking like she'd decided to, which was probably the most accurate version of it. Min-jun rose and looked briefly at Naomi with an expression that had something in it that was working toward being an acknowledgement of something, which was, for Min-jun at 29, probably as far as he'd gotten. Sun-hee was already standing. She was standing at the far end of the room where she had always arranged herself, and she was looking at her daughter-in-law with an expression that Darius had never seen on his mother's face in 43 years of observing it. Not softness, that wasn't the right word. Something more precise than softness. Recognition, maybe. Or the specific expression of a woman who has spent her whole life being the person who weighs other people's worth and has arrived in her 7th decade at the understanding that the scale was always measuring the wrong thing. Naomi walked to her seat, the seat to the right of Darius, the seat she had sat in at the meeting that had changed everything, the seat that was just a chair but was also the accumulated weight of everything it had taken to arrive at the right to occupy it without apology. She sat. Darius sat beside her. The room settled. The dinner was ordinary. The food came and people talked, and the particular rhythms of a family assembling around a shared table reasserted themselves, imperfect and complicated and real. Naomi talked to one of the older advisors about something Darius couldn't entirely follow from his end of the table. She laughed once, genuinely, at something the advisor said, and the sound of it moved through the room and nobody made anything of it, which was the best possible sign. Darius ate his food and watched his wife be in the room and was aware, in the specific grounded way that does not arrive dramatically, but quietly, like a thing that has been approaching from a long distance and has now simply arrived, that the thing he had almost lost was here. Not because he had built the right structure, not because he had signed the right documents, or transferred the right authority, or made the right speech at the right moment, because Naomi had decided to stay. She had looked at everything, the folder, the family, the medical report, the 8 weeks, all of it, and she had decided with the same quiet deliberateness with which she did everything that mattered to her, to stay. Not in the old marriage, in a new one, on terms she had named, with a man she had told directly what he needed to change, and was now watching to see if he changed it. He was changing it. He was changing it in the way things actually change. Not all at once, not without setback, not without the occasional defaulting to old patterns that Naomi would note, and he would catch, and they would work through with the particular unglamorous patience of two people who have decided that the work is worth it. It was worth it. The dinner ended. People began to say their goodbyes. Naomi was talking to Sun-hee at the far end of the room. Actually talking, not performing the talking, something with gestures and what appeared to be, from where Darius stood across the room, mutual attention. He watched this without going to join it. Some things needed room to breathe. Park appeared at his shoulder, the way Park had appeared at his shoulder for 11 years. "Car's ready whenever you need it." "Not yet," Darius said. Park looked at Naomi and Sun-hee. He looked at Darius. "Of course," he said, and stepped back. The room continued to empty. The night outside the estate windows was clear and cold, the particular clear of a winter night in Seoul, when there's no weather coming in, just the city doing what it did, enormous and indifferent and full of people. Naomi finished her conversation. She came across the room to where he was standing, and she stood beside him, and they watched the last of the family say their good nights and filter out. "Ready?" he said. She looked at the room, the table, the paintings, the particular weight of the space that had housed the Kwon name for 30 years. She looked at it without fear, and without contempt, and without the careful neutrality she had maintained in it for 3 years. She just looked at it. Yeah, she said. They walked out together. Outside, the air was sharp and clear and very cold. Their breath showed. The car waited at the bottom of the steps. Park held the door. Naomi got in. Darius got in beside her. The door closed. The estate receded behind them as the car pulled away. Naomi leaned her head back against the seat. She was looking at the roof of the car with the settled expression of someone who has completed something that needed to be completed and is now simply on the way home. Home. The apartment in Yongsan with the east-facing windows, and the table they had argued about, and the coffee maker that needed filters, and the jujubes that turned the water red when you gave them time. The place that was theirs, that bore neither name, that had been built from nothing they had inherited. Darius looked out the window as the city moved past. The ordinary city, full of its ordinary people, all of them navigating the specific and unrepeatable conditions of their own lives. He had spent a very long time believing he was separate from that, elevated above it by the weight of his name and the structures he had built, and the considerable distance he had maintained between himself and anything that could not be managed. He was not separate from it. He had never been. "The kitchen is Wednesday," Naomi said, without opening her eyes. "I know," he said. "Mrs. Yoon said she wants you to try the soup next time. Not just serving it, making it." "I don't know how to make soup." "I know," she said. "That's why she wants you to try." He turned from the window. He looked at his wife in the dark of the moving car, at the quiet on her face, the specific quality of rest that is different from sleep, the rest of someone who has been through a very long thing and is now on the other side of it and knows the difference. "Naomi," he said. She opened her eyes. He did not say anything else. He just looked at her, and she looked at him, and the city moved outside the windows,